Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Chapter 64. Ocean's Song flew quickly across the waters. As he touched land in Italy, there was no need to track the creature. He could see the destruction it wrought. Even the cloven hoofprint, even the demolished tree, every obstacle in its way had been mowed down as if it were a weed. An utter lack of caring in what barred its path. It didn't matter if it was a building or people either, it was all the same. His knowledge on the Caledonian boar wasn't much. He knew the vague details. It was a punishment monster sent down because a king failed to honor Artemis. And the king called to a group of heroes to slay the beast. They all gathered but had a hard time hurting it until they finally managed to put the beast down. Other than that, there wasn't much other information to go on. Other than the hero Atalanta, he couldn't really recall any of the other names associated with the hunting of the animal. How strong was it? It was a monster created by a goddess, so it had to have some amount of strength. Yet, it was so casually let loose to cause chaos without a single care by its creator either. Ocean's Song found himself frowning at the lack of responsibility taken. At the very least, shouldn't it be leashed somewhere by the goddess? It was the goddess of hunt's divine punishment, yet the punishment was now being given upon many innocent souls who had the bad luck to simply exist within its path. As Ocean's Song flew further, he finally found his target. It wasn't moving quickly, if anything, it was a lazy pace. Yet, he could see its hide peeking up over the tree line. It was truly a monstrous boar. Ocean's Song also didn't hide his presence as he touched onto the ground, nor did he announce himself in a flamboyant way. Merely, he stood dozens of yards ahead in the boar's path. Normally, the Caledonian boar would have ignored such an ant, trampled upon it, and kept going, but its large hooves came to a stop. Monster looked at monster. Fellow Tao. Ocean's Song opened his mouth as he normally would but found the words dying in his throat. It was strange to him, he usually had words to say. But now, what do you say to the one responsible for killing your mother? What do you say when you're not even sure you mourn their death? He had been asking himself, would he even want to truly build a relationship with her after his abandonment? Perhaps, at the end of the day, he just wanted to know why, to hear it properly and move on with his life and no longer care. You killed my mother. Ocean's Song finally spoke. The boar pushed out a burst of warm air from its snout as if to dismiss him. Ocean's Song didn't waste any more words and simply swung his swords. The air screeched as it was cut in half, and a flash of light flew towards the monster, cutting apart dozens of trees before it collided with the boar. However, to Ocean's Song's confusion, it seemed to simply splash across his body as nothing happened. The boar responded without giving him a chance to respond and charged. As soon as the boar took a step forward, Ocean's Song felt the shift around it. It was fast, extremely so, but it was more than that. The boar's razor-sharp tusks were already in front of his face, and he braced himself as the boar began to push him back. He did his best to dig his feet into the ground, but against logic, it seemed that regardless of how much strength he was putting into it, he couldn't stop the creature's charge. It wasn't able to trample him, but just as well, Ocean's Song grasped the tusks as the boar let out a furious roar and continued charging forward, forcing Ocean's Song to be carried along. He could see the pure desire to kill in the creature's eyes. That's all it existed to do. It was created to trample, to destroy, to crush anything in its path. Ocean's Song let out a shout and pushed the tusks away, rolling to the side. The boar continued its charge for hundreds of more meters, everything within its path utterly decimated and flattened or destroyed. The Cyclops looked down at the sword in his hand, frowning. The boar did a large swerve before lowering its tusks and coming at him again. Ocean's Song swung his sword again, many more lights slashed at the boar at lightning speed. And each one of them collided with the creature but left not a single mark upon its body. In fact, it barely even blinked at the attacks. It knew they would cause it no harm. Ocean's Song stabbed his sheathed sword into the ground, and his third eye opened. His monstrous, baleful aura erupted around him. Instead of dodging or attacking with his sword again, he took a stance and held his fist back. The boar charged, and Ocean's Song threw a punch. The two opposing forces collided, bursting outwards with a cataclysmic booming. Everything that hadn't already been trampled had been uprooted and blown away by the residual force of the two monsters clashing. Ocean's Song's eyes widened because he knew almost immediately he had lost the clash. All the energy and power he put into that punch had seemingly been repelled, and it sent the Cyclops flying backwards as the boar let out a triumphant roar. The hit didn't debilitate him into silence. Even as he pushed himself up off the ground some dozens of yards away and wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth, he was uncaring about the damage he suffered. But slowly, he grinned. I get it now. Even though my punch was far stronger, I lost because of your concept, is that right? The Cyclops let out a breath. I seem to recall a bit of the story now. The blows that felled you, they came from the rear. He continued, letting his chaotic aura calm down. When you charge, you can't be stopped, perhaps some concept of unimpediment. In my first sword strike, you weren't charging, but you are seemingly conceptually immune to attacks from the front. The Caledonian boar was a divine beast of punishment, it wasn't a simple monster. It was designed to trample anything in its path, that meant when it charged, it couldn't be stopped. And from the stories, he recalled, the first strike to do damage came from striking the boar from the rear. The boar stomped its front hoof on the ground, blowing out air from its nostrils. The bloodlust in its eyes intensified, as if telling Ocean Song that he hit the nail on the head in this case. I wonder, do you also feel discarded and without purpose? I heard those say that there's a chance at godhood awaiting anyone brave enough to claim Rome. Is that what you want? To evolve beyond what you were created for? The boar let out another roar and charged again. Sword, he called out, and his sword shot out of the ground from where he left it and flew towards his hand. The full breath of his Tao hadn't recovered yet, but it was fine. He simply closed his eyes, and the Tai Chi formation appeared on the ground. He walked into the boar's charge and casually swung his sword. The boar was confused because it missed him as Ocean Song took a step to the side, and then its bloodshot eyes noticed that one of its tusks had been cut clean off. It let out another roar of rage and confusion as it rampaged through another set of trees not far ahead, like it was asking what had just happened. Once the trick is identified, it's not very difficult. Ocean Song held his sword parallel to the ground, aiming it at the boar as it did a long turn, not ending its charge. I simply have to change my attack to come from a different angle, even if I attack from the front. He grasped the handle with two hands and swung again as he turned his body just enough to avoid the beast's forward charging body. The second tusk went flying up into the air. Its tusks were mighty weapons, stronger and sharper than steel, feared by the heroes of old, but they weren't its main weapon. Its greatest weapon had always been its large body. It charged even faster, picking up momentum as it took a long detour before lining up with Ocean Song again and letting out a roar of defiance. The next thing it saw was a flash of red, and the boar's roars were filled with pain, and it went tumbling onto the ground. Its left eye had been slashed clean through. Ah, you have quite the thick hide, don't you? I intended for that slash to take your ear as well. Ocean Song stood over the downed body of the beast. For the first time, the Caledonian boar appeared concerned. Perhaps even frightened. It was a strange feeling for the ancient beast, because it hadn't ever felt an inexplicable fear before. It knew to cower before the gods, a logic that any creature below the threshold knew. It had been killed by heroes before, more than once even, but it had never been systematically disassembled before. Get up, try again. Don't worry, I'm patient. We have all day. Rage overcomes fear. Rage was a feeling it knew better, and it sunk everything it had into the rage it was created with. The massive boar stomped its feet, standing back up, and roared defiantly. Ocean Song noticed that its aura seemed to intensify, as if it was showing off everything it had. The title of divine punishment wasn't just for show, it was a powerful monster. A last stand, a final desperate attempt. Ocean Song put his sword away. Fine, let's see who gives up first. He gestured for the beast to come. The Caledonian boar charged at him with all the strength it could muster, and Ocean Song merely welcomed it. He let out his own shout as he grabbed the knobs of its tusks as handles and pushed against the unstoppable force. Ocean Song dug his heels in, but even so, the boar continued to push him back continuously. Yet, he refused to budge even an inch as well. The boar charged continuously. It didn't matter what was in its way as it carried Ocean Song with it. Trees, rocks, and cliffs. Ocean Song didn't even know how far it carried him, miles upon miles without slowing down. In fact, he noticed that the boar was speeding up gradually. It wasn't until Ocean Song hit the first building that he realized he had been taken far off course and deep into the country from where he was originally. He used his divine sense to push away any people in this path, letting it sweep outwards for thousands of yards far ahead. But he continued to struggle in this battle. Every building the boar destroyed only seemed to encourage it further. The rage and bloodlust in its eyes didn't dissipate at all, its hooves hitting the ground like thunder with every stomp, and Ocean Song continued without breaking eye contact with the monstrous beast. Who would give up first? Would the boar's power run out first, or would Ocean Song be unable to continue holding on and get trampled underfoot? The boar was confident in its one strength. Yet, with every mile it continued onwards, it felt the creeping sensation down its spine. Onwards and onwards it continued its charge, but the smaller monster clutching onto it refused to budge. This was never something it had experienced before. Nothing had ever been able to meet it at its strongest, to stop its one purpose, to trample and destroy, but here and now, someone was doing just that. Onward and onward, with every step, the boar could feel it, its power, its will, waning just a tiny bit. A prolonged fight, someone that refused to give like this. It had never tested itself against this sort of thing before, and it was coming to realize its prided rampage wasn't without limits. It felt it keenly when ramming through a towering human structure. The impact should have been debilitating, deadly, even harmful to the one grasping its front, yet his eyes still showed that unwavering cold gleam in them. All it took was a single thought in the back of its head. I will lose. It was enough that its stride began to break. It kept going, but each step was more haggard than the rest. It breathed out, trying to deny it, but its stride was no longer even. Its charge was running out, meeting some sort of limitation it never knew it had before. And it wasn't the only one to realize it. Ocean Song opened his mouth to taunt it one final time before fully stomping on its pride and ending the monster, but the words died as he saw something fall from the sky. Gleaming silver pierced through the back of the boar's head, impaling it firmly into the ground. The momentum of its charge had completely dispersed, and the massive boar went limp without even time to understand how it died. Ocean Song, however, went tumbling, disoriented by the sudden turn of events. Who? Ocean Song shouted, looking up to the sky. Then he saw it, something that seemed to exist at multiple folded layers, its body twisting in ways that he was fairly sure didn't exist in the human language. Eyes, feathers, be not afraid, he heard the words as the being snapped together. It wasn't some kind of mist illusion, but as if the creature was hiding its true self behind a false one. Too late, I already peed myself. Ocean Song replied, knowing exactly what he was looking at. An angel. It was strange, the word, the realization. Even as a monster himself, and even meeting gods, it was strange to acknowledge the angel in front of him. Its current form was more like what people depicted in artworks, what people thought of when someone mentioned the species. A beautiful woman in white robes floated down with two pure white wings fluttering in the breeze. However, there was a very uncanny rejection in Ocean Song's eyes as he tried to think of her as a person. He could feel that there was something off, like he was staring at a machine that was simply mimicking a person. It showed absolutely no emotions on its face, and he couldn't even see the facsimile of breathing or basic bodily functions. Even gods breathe when they take human form. It's redundant and doesn't serve a purpose, but they still do it to appear more human. This thing in front of him did none of that. Ocean Song recognized that he may have made a boo-boo. Perhaps he was a bit closer to the Vatican than he had anticipated. In his anger, he may have gotten wrapped up in his own mess and forgotten the very explicit warning his father gave him. However, Ocean Song was also angry. Furious even. Once again, someone stole away his chance at closure. Granted, this instance was a lot less grudge-inducing than the boar killing his mother, but the principle still remained. Ocean Song took out his sword and pointed it at the angel. The angel put both hands together, its voice ethereal despite the unnaturalness of it. Child of the sea, return. You stole my kill, you stole my righteous vengeance. Its eyes opened, looking at Ocean Song. I demand to speak to your manager. There was a pause. Ocean Song didn't expect that to do anything. He was mostly panicking and blurting out the first thing that appeared in his head. However, the clouds above parted, and a light shone down. The angel looked up as if it were talking to someone else. Ocean Song gulped. He realized he may have made a small mistake. Chapter 65. Ocean Song hummed together with the music. He didn't know why there was an elevator that was taking him up to heaven, but it wasn't that strange, just as well. Olympus had an elevator that took you up to it, too. Maybe it was just a good thing. Did every pantheon compete with who had the best elevators? Now that he thought about it, didn't Hotel Valhalla also have elevators? He reckoned that he just couldn't understand such profound Tao just yet. He made a mental note to install elevators in the sect when he got back. He didn't understand their significance yet, but he wouldn't let himself look like some elevatorless mortal. Ocean Song wasn't alone on this little adventure either. The angel from before was accompanying him. It didn't talk much, or at all. In fact, it was staring. He may have called it rude, but he realized that this seemed to be its default expression. In that, he never once saw it even blink. At first, it was uncanny and creepy. It still was, mind you. But it was at first as well. Despite that, however, he had a lot of questions. And he wasn't usually one to hold back on asking any of his profound questions. But in this case, he felt that perhaps things are best left unanswered. Like, how come the angel can fit in this elevator with him when it was very clearly much larger than the elevator, and its human-like guise was only an illusion on the surface? He didn't ask that question because he would probably get an answer that made him cry, like he almost did when he accidentally saw the angel's true form. Regardless, the elevator continued with its gentle music that he continued to hum along with as it ascended to the sky. The elevator door dinged and opened. Ocean Song peeked outside and blinked in surprise. It was odd. Why was he in an office building? The angel walked out silently, and Ocean Song followed along. They passed several offices, and he peeked in them as they passed. There seemed to be other people inside. He wasn't sure. He thought he saw several angels, but he didn't check, and they seemed to be sitting behind desks while they had humans across from them. It was certainly a strange sight. Though he got a good look at one passing by, and it was most certainly an angel because it had the same expressionless face about it. Not a hint of emotion, unblinking, unbreathing. It didn't even spare Ocean Song a glance as it passed by. Ocean Song peeked ahead next, trying to see where the angel was taking him, but the hallway seemed to go on forever. Curiosity got the best of him, and he swept his divine sense out to see how far it went. He staggered slightly because as soon as his divine sense reached out, hundreds of things seemed to look back at him. He had to brace himself against the wall. Please do not cause trouble. The angel leading him had stopped, speaking to him in that same robotic voice. Ocean Song took a moment to catch his breath and just nodded dumbly. This time, as they passed the offices, the angels inside were looking at him as he passed. Staring would be more apt a description, unblinkingly watching him until he disappeared from view. He had a feeling that he was far over his head this time. He may or may not have made a big oopsie and just doubled down. Well, there was only one thing to do. Pretend like he knew what he was doing. That seemed to work more often than not. He just hoped they didn't take all his talk of rebelling against the heavens personally. Finally, the angel stopped in front of an office door as if to tell him to go inside. Ocean Song peeked around the door's corner to see who was inside, but was surprised as it appeared not to be an angel sitting at the desk. "Come in," the voice called out, sounding tired. A stark contrast to the normal tone and mannerisms of the angel he had been interacting with so far. Ocean Song shuffled into the office and sat down at the only chair available. The man behind the desk was elderly. A long white beard, a head of white hair. There was even a nameplate on his desk that said, Peter. "Thank you, Ambriel, I'll handle it from here," he spoke, and the angel standing at the door just turned around and left. He wrote several lines on various papers, stacking them to the side, shuffling a few more before letting out a sigh and tilting his glasses down. "Name?" he asked. "Ocean Song." The man grunted. "And I heard you wish to file a complaint." "Yes." Ocean Song nodded. "And what's the nature of your complaint?" "That angel stole my righteous kill," Ocean Song stated. He said emotionlessly. "And that's pretty much it." Ocean Song kicked his feet in the chair. "It was very rude." The man sighed, taking his glasses off, and he rubbed his eyes. "My name is Peter, I handle the human relations affairs that happen on Earth." "Saint Peter?" Ocean Song inquired. "So I've been called." He nodded. "Fellow Taoist, your illustrious name is well known to this lowly Cyclops. The great gatekeeper of heaven." Saint Peter blinked. "I see, your suit is very nice. I like the upgrade from the robes you are depicted with." Ocean Song compliment. "I'm not actually wearing a suit," Saint Peter responded. "Your mind is just interpreting what you're seeing to be something pleasant and conventional to your sensibilities." "Oh," Ocean Song blinked this time. "Then what are you wearing?" he asked, tilting his head. "This is heaven, I'm not wearing any clothes." Ocean Song pondered his words before nodding to himself. He stood up and began taking off his robes. "What are you doing?" St. Peter asked. "Respecting your culture." Ocean Song stood proudly, completely nude. St. Peter opened his mouth before closing it again, only to let out another long sigh. "Please put your clothes back on." Ocean Song clasped his hands behind his back. "There's no need to be intimidated, fellow Taoist. If he were going to be smited, it would be after he established dominance." "Mr. Ocean Song." Ocean Song deadpanned. "Will you please sit down so we can discuss your complaint?" Ocean Song politely sat down. "Yes, I would like to file a complaint. Because." St. Peter picked up the paper. "You say that Ambriel, quote, stole your kill." He silently read over it for a moment. "That's right. You are aware that in accordance with the treaty of $@$at$% and at." The words were like static to Ocean Song's ears. He nearly fell out of his chair as St. Peter paused. "Oh yes, I apologize. In accordance with the treaties, the Greek pantheon of gods, Olympus and its associated deities, including both the underworld and extended parties, are forbidden from approaching the Vatican." St. Peter held up the paper, showing Ocean Song a lot of text, small print, that seemed to go on for far longer than the paper's length. "I'm not a god," Ocean Song pointed out. Section 476, subsection 3, children of gods also fall under this category. Ocean Song slapped his hand on the table. "Well, no one taught me how to read." St. Peter sighed, rubbing his eyes again. "Mr. Ocean Song," he reached under his desk, shifting through several papers. "It says on your file." "I have a file. Everyone has a file," he answered without missing a beat. "In your file, it says that you are." He paused, doing a double take. He looked at the papers, then at Ocean Song, then at the papers again. Quote. "It says that you're not even a year old. Does it make you feel good, fellow Taoist? A lofty saint, bullying an infant." Ocean Song spoke. St. Peter opened his mouth again, finding a response rather difficult. "Regardless, you broke the treaty. Technically, I wasn't approaching the Vatican. I was being pushed towards it," Ocean Song pointed out. "Be that as it may, you are not supposed to be anywhere near the Vatican." "I was still far away from it," Ocean Song argued. "Then let's call it even, and you can be on your way," St. Peter said calmly. Ocean Song realized what he just did. It turned it around and made it an issue about him, getting close, to the Vatican, making him almost forget the reason he was making a complaint. "There's still the issue of your employee stealing my kill." Ocean Song didn't budge. "Mr. Ocean Song, Ambriel was fulfilling her duties, keeping monsters away from the Vatican." St. Peter responded. "Her actions are fully in line with the orders she was given and within the parameters of the rules. She only intervened after I had defeated the Caledonian boar." Ocean Song replied. "It had stopped its charge and collapsed. Logically, it posed no threat to the Vatican, nor was it continuing its approach. Therefore, I argue that her intervention was completely unnecessary and, in fact, detrimental by killing it before I was allowed to finish it off." St. Peter pursed his lips because he wasn't expecting an articulated argument to come from the naked Cyclops in front of him after everything that had happened so far. When he said it like that, it did make things more gray. "Heaven will acknowledge your credit in defeating it and will speak on your behalf if proof is required. Is that sufficient for you, Mr. Ocean Song?" he asked. "I don't care about credit." Ocean Song frowned. "I was seeking revenge." St. Peter paused. "Revenge?" He nodded. St. Peter breathed out. "Mr. Ocean Song, you should know that we're not in the habit of helping settle petty grudges." Despite his fear of the surroundings, Ocean Song found himself getting angry at the dismissal. Ocean Song's divine sense flared up. "I call upon the Archangel of Justice to judge if my vengeance was righteous or not." St. Peter was about to respond, but his eyes widened as the room shook. Ocean Song watched as the walls around them pulled away, like reality was being picked apart, brick by brick. As the walls disappeared, Ocean Song saw that their little room was now within the palm of someone's hand. A vague silhouette, undefined, rather, intentionally undefined by his own mind. It bled through the cracks in reality, indescribable shapes and symbols, before reaffirming a more subtle imagery of a human-like silhouette. Massive in scope, but more humanoid than it truly was under the surface. On one hand, the room that Ocean Song and St. Peter stood in was the void around them. In the other, it held a scale. Speak. It wasn't words spoken. Ocean Song's instinct told him that if it spoke words, his ears would probably bleed. It was as if he were standing in front of a god without its godly form sealed away, with just the thinnest membrane keeping all that power at bay. The Caledonian boar killed my mother. I was on a personal quest to find her after being abandoned to seek answers and closure to remove this knot in my heart. Upon finding her killer, I sought vengeance to kill it by my own hand to put matters to rest. Before I could finish the beast off, the kill was stolen. Ocean Song spoke about his matter. He had a feeling that he didn't need to go into too many details, that a simple recount was enough. The massive scale in the Archangel's hand slowly began to tilt to one side. It was only when he spoke again that Ocean Song understood the significance. Justified, everything seemed to snap back into place around him. The walls returned around him as Ocean Song found himself sitting once more in the chair, almost falling out as he had just been tossed back onto it. St. Peter seemed much less disoriented. Your revenge has been ruled justified. St. Peter spoke again. Heaven recognizes that your revenge had been disrupted by one of our own, and you are now owed a debt. Ocean Song found himself surprised. Because he didn't think that would work out either. He had no idea that calling upon an archangel to judge him would do anything except make it sound properly dramatic to prove a point. If he wasn't still naked, he would stand up and let his robes billow heroically. That simple, he hesitantly asked. Mr. Ocean Song, I invite you to contemplate why I, a human, handle human relations. Quote. St. Peter sighed. Angels are not infallible, Mr. Ocean Song. In the sense that they follow orders, even if those orders contradict what we mortals consider common sense. Ambriel was not wrong, she will not be punished. Heaven, however, recognizes that her actions had caused harm to you. Thus, heaven will recognize that you are owed a debt of grievance. Really, do you think I'm lying to you? St. Peter asked. Fellow Taoist, Ocean Song opened his mouth, considering the best way to respond. I'm Greek. St. Peter immediately understood what he was saying. That is, Ocean Song never expected such a polite and acknowledged wrongdoing from a governing godly body. Compared to the angels, this was far stranger. Does that mean I can ask for anything I want? Ocean Song perked up. Within reason, St. Peter had a bad feeling. Can I meet God? No. Can I meet Jesus? No. How come Jesus didn't wrestle Thor when he got challenged? He has better things to do than wrestle a pagan god. Like what? At the time, he was busy building homes for the less fortunate. St. Peter answered. How righteous, Ocean Song replied, secretly making a note to go try and find him with this little clue. How about a divine relic from heaven's vaults? No. Can you let me meet my mother? Ocean Song asked, this time a bit more seriously. St. Peter caught it and seriously considered his request. One moment, he said, turning his chair around and rummaging through a file cabinet. Your mother was an ocean nymph. That's right, St. Peter let out a sigh. Ocean nymphs are nature spirits. Nature spirits return to the earth when they die unless there are special circumstances. The earth, in this case, is not something we can stick our hands into without causing other problems. That would be, poking Gaia and waking her up just to ask for a nymph spirit back was not what one would call a reasonable request here. In fact, it would have been simpler if they could petition Hades or find the nymph in Tartarus in the unlikely case it ended up there. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case. Oh, Ocean Song looked down. I see. St. Peter felt a twinge of pity for him. Then my heart can only be filled by being given one of the fabled apples from the Garden of Eden. No, St. Peter looked at him dryly, his previous sympathy dissipating completely. Fine, then there's one thing I want, and then I'll consider this debt settled. Line break, Ocean Song hummed to himself as he took the elevator back down from heaven. He was accompanied by the same angel. There was no real small talk. She continued to stare at him. Maybe it was just his elegance that caught her eye this time, because there was ever so slightly a different look in her eyes. He couldn't fault her. His lofty cultivator aura was hard to ignore. Now reclothed, his robes billowed heroically. He may not have been able to find closure, but he found something possibly better. The angel's eyes were ever so slightly drawn to the top of his head, which sat, a rather familiar hat. World iconic, one could even say. The angel continued to look at the Pope hat that was now on his head. Ocean Song was very proud of himself. He also got a visitor's pass so he wouldn't run into trouble if he came around the area again. But that didn't matter nearly as much as owning the Pope's hat. Truly, he was a cultivator without peer to manage to acquire an artifact of such fame and status. Chapter 66. Ocean Song liked his new hat. It was not often that one came across a hat deserving to sit upon the head of a mighty cultivator like himself. His robes billowed heroically with the Pope hat on his head as he clasped his hands behind his back. "Fellow Taoist, quick, get over here for the picture," he called out. The angel that had accompanied him to heaven was now standing unmoving next to him as Ocean Song held up his phone to take a picture of them both. "Wonderful, a good addition to my collection that I will show my fellow sect members when I return home." He nodded to himself. He looked back at the iconic square that shows up in various media when the Vatican is mentioned. He adjusted his hat, very pleased with himself. Ocean Song prided himself on his ability as an expert negotiator. How else was he able to get heaven to capitulate to his demands? Truly, he was given much face as a proper cultivator. Sure, he also got a visitor's pass that essentially let him go anywhere he wanted in their territory. Something that would be a high honor for any creature on the planet and something coveted, as very few exist. And sure, it may be exceedingly rare, to the point where there may not be another on the planet. And yes, it shows that he does apparently have some amount of favor or goodwill from the more feared faction in the world. But all of that didn't matter. Why? Because he had a Pope hat. "Mommy, why is that man wearing a purple suit and the Pope's hat?" A young girl pointed at the posing Ocean Song. "Don't point, sweetheart, it's rude," her mom said in a hushed tone. "Some people are just weird, sweetheart. Make sure to stay away from him." The woman quickly pulled her daughter out of sight. In fact, most people were steering clear of him. Ocean Song didn't take her words to heart. Clearly, the little girl had eyes but couldn't see MT. "Tai. Come along, fellow Taoist. There are more sights to take in." Ocean Song dragged the literal angel with him across the city. The angel never once uttered a word of complaint or reacted at all to it. It was given the duty to be his bodyguard for the duration of his stay, and it was performing that duty as instructed. He just decided to take a tour of the Vatican, with absolutely no ulterior motives whatsoever. They quickly made their way across the large square and down the block to their next location. Ocean Song, being such a high-profile cultivator, was, of course, given face and let through any sort of lines or waiting. That is, he used the mist to obscure himself as he ignored everyone else waiting. "Look, fellow Taoist, what a marvelous painting." Ocean Song snapped a picture of the Sistine Chapel's most famous painting. The angel looked at it expressionlessly. "Look, fellow Taoist, a face painter." Ocean Song dragged the angel outside again as he saw the artist. Ocean Song stood stoically as he watched the artist paint the angel's face into a cat. He gave the artist a big tip because he felt that the artist did a good job, if a bit abstract. "Look, fellow Taoist, McDonald's. The holiest of all McDonald's." They had lunch. Unfortunately, Ocean Song found that they don't give the toys out to adults in the kids' meals. And most unfortunate as well, his Karen technique seemingly was defeated by the experienced staff of this holy establishment. "Look, fellow Taoist, it's a keep out sign." Ocean Song pulled the angel to the far side of the palace that the Pope lived in. The angel stared blankly at the keep out sign on the metal gate that Ocean Song scaled, ignoring it completely. The angel's cat-painted expression didn't change at all as it slowly floated up over the metal bars and followed along. Ocean Song adjusted his Pope hat. "Fellow Taoist, play it cool." Ocean Song clasped his hands behind his back as he strolled across the parking lot next to the palace. A few of the Vatican's finest guards passed by without so much as giving them a look. Truly, he was a master of stealth. The magical mist also helped. Ocean Song spotted his target not far away. However, as he approached, his eyes widened because a certain elderly man walked out of the palace, escorted by an entourage. The elderly man froze in place, and his entourage noticed his confusion. The elderly man met Ocean Song's eyes, then his eyes trailed up to the hat on his head. "Is that my hat? We've been had. Leg it, fellow Taoist." Ocean Song quickly ran towards the target of focus. A white truck with a glass person-sized case on the back. Otherwise known as the Popemobile. "The keys are in the ignition, take the wheel, fellow Taoist." Ocean Song shouted as he climbed into the back. Line break. High upon the heavens, St. Peter went about his normal work. The momentary distraction of a Cyclops coming to lodge a complaint was already far out of his mind as he handled his work. "Let's see, John Turnip." Peter looked up from his clipboard. Yes, I'm in heaven. You're Saint Peter. I can't wait to meet Jesus. The naked man stood in front of him. Yes, it's very exciting. Let's just get your paperwork in order. Ah, there's a slight problem, It looks like you died while actively participating in tax evasion. Tax evasion, quite. Peter's lips thinned. It's essentially theft, which is a sin. You're unfortunately going to be routed to a 3-year stint in purgatory while you purge your sins that were left unpaid in life. Pun not intended. He fell through the ground, and Peter barely spared it a glance. Next, Peter called out, but no one came. Instead, he blinked and looked up as if someone was talking to him. Lord Metatron, Peter asked. There was no sound, yet Peter's brow furrowed as if listening to something that only he could hear. I apologize, but I don't have much insight into the Cyclops that I met earlier. Perhaps I could request you to elaborate so that I may be of more assistance. He asked. The room around him shook slightly, but it didn't disorient the old saint. Though, it continued for a few moments before Peter grimaced. Lord Metatron, he called out. Finally, there was an awkward throat clearing. I apologize, I often forget how to interact with humans after so long. The words reached Peter, and they were much less substantial. It wasn't as if they were being sent through the world and divinely inserted into his mind. He was the most human angel, mostly because he was originally a human in some context. However, even he would forget what it means to be human and need to correct himself, to lower himself down to their level to properly communicate. The voice of God was not actually speaking, but it was the equivalent of him going from his normal conversational tone to barely a whisper so that Peter wouldn't be disoriented by the voice. We express curiosity. Peter furrowed his brow still. Despite being a human who had existed in heaven for centuries and worked here, his humanity was important enough that it was retained compared to his compatriots. His mannerisms, his speech, and his actions and words were preserved to continue to be human while being the face of heaven as the gates. It was a mark of pride for Peter, and it was an understanding for everyone else to accommodate him. Favored by death, ominous, Peter responded, though he could feel Metatron's amusement as it was perceived by him. There was another screeching that filled the area, and Peter winced slightly. He didn't say a word about speaking lightly, this time because what was conveyed wasn't something that could be spoken in human words even as he parsed it in his human mind. Unknown and outside, Peter frowned because that wasn't quite right. He scratched his head but couldn't make heads or tails of it. Is there something wrong with him? Let it be what will be. Watch what can be. That's entirely unhelpful, Peter grumbled. Ironically, Peter wasn't being rude, despite how it came off. It was far from the first time that the voice of God had interacted with Peter, and he preferred the bluntness of human speech. If you're looking for me to say if I noticed anything strange, then I can make a list. Saint Peter deadpanned. I can start with him being happy to take the Pope's headpiece as compensation. I still don't know why that was allowed. Peter shook his head. Worldly items are of no importance. It's the principle, Peter signed. Besides, if it's of no importance, then why did he ask for it in the first place? It is a nice hat. Peter had the strangest feeling that the voice of God was making a joke. Peter let out a sigh. At least he can't cause trouble with it. It is just a hat after all. As if to prove him wrong, the void in front of him shifted, as if he had a front row seat to see what was happening down below. Fellow Taoist, right, fellow Taoist, Ocean Song shouted in panic as the Popemobile did a sharp right turn to avoid a police blockade. There were several police cars after them. The Popemobile was not made to be moving at the speeds it was moving at, and every turn nearly had it flipping over on its side as Ocean Song led them on a chase through the city. Why is Ambriel driving the stolen Popemobile through the Vatican while being chased by the local police with him in the back? St. Peter went straight to the point. The view in front of him changes. It was now Ocean Song quickly getting into the Popemobile in a panic. Fellow Taoist, take the wheel. Ambriel stood there outside the car, looking at it blankly. Fellow Taoist, quickly, before the guards come. Off in the distance, the Pope and his entourage had a moment of confusion and bewilderment before they acted. Fellow Taoist, I understand your plight, but allow me to convince you. The Popemobile belongs to the Pope. The Pope's hat belongs to the Pope. Only the Pope is allowed to wear the Pope hat. I am wearing the Pope hat, and it's mine. Therefore, I am the owner of the Popemobile, and as the owner, I say, please start the car and drive away, they're coming. St. Peter opened his mouth wide as he watched Ambriel climb into the driver's seat, start the car, and drive away before the guards could get them. They even rammed through a gate to escape. She believed that, Peter asked. Her orders are to accompany him where he wants to go. Quote. Bow before your new pope, Ocean Song shouted as they drove through the streets. St. Peter facepalmed. The images seemed to orient themselves as he was watching what happened in the wrong sequence of events based on the first. Stop shooting at your pope. The police had taken to trying to shoot out the tires of the popemobile. St. Peter opened his mouth for a moment before speaking. The hat doesn't give him any actual authority, does it? No. Good. He nodded to himself, merely checking. She's surprisingly good at driving. I wouldn't have guessed. He would not have guessed that Ambriel knew how to drive so well. It seemed like such a mundane thing to know how to do for an angel. The view in front of him collapsed and returned to normal. I apologize that I could not be of more help, St. Peter said respectfully. Is there something special or unique about him that we should be concerned about? It's not every day that a mortal catches the eye of one of you. Everyone is special and unique. Despite no words being spoken, they carried a tone of affection with them. I suppose they are, Peter said softly as he felt the presence of the voice of God recede, indicating that he had left. But I find it unlikely that anyone is as unique as that idiot. Line break. Ares let out a long sigh as he dried his hair off. Being immortal was difficult sometimes. It took well over an hour in the shower before he could get the smell of horse poop off him. And he didn't even have hot water. He was almost entirely sure that it was Barnacle Beard who cursed his shower to not give hot water. Still, he was at least allowed moments of rest. With everything going on with Hercules and the gods, he was sort of glad that he didn't have to deal with it. He was still furious at the one responsible for his current punishment. Especially since he didn't actually steal the tree, but no one would believe him. His family was running around trying to put out fires that his half-brother was starting, presumably, just for shits and giggles. At the very least, it put a smile on his face seeing all of them panic and have to play cleanup while Hercules did what he did best. Being Hercules, maybe it would do them good to remember how things used to be in the old days. When real heroes didn't drive across the country because an oracle gave them a prophecy. When real heroes were forged through blood and steel. Everything was too handholdy for his tastes these days. Hercules didn't get an oracle. He didn't grab a bunch of other demigods and use all their fancy gadgets and modern conveniences to downplay a significant portion of what made a quest a quest. No, he charged right into the gardens and beat the ever-loving shit out of the 100-headed dragon and uprooted the tree, again, and walked away. And then, what did he do? He used one of the bigger branches to carve a new club, eat an apple, and flip everyone the bird. That was how heroes should act, in Ares' eyes. Obviously, he wouldn't let any of the brats disrespect them if they tried that shit. But he would at least remember them and acknowledge their sheer balls. War favors the bold after all. No, everything today was so tedious. Like they were just going through the motions compared to the old days. Trying to relive the same stories over and over and over again. How many times were they supposed to get excited when one of their brats kills the Minotaur? How many times were they supposed to celebrate when one of their brats found the golden fleece? That hadn't happened in over 100 years, so by Ares' reckoning, it was due soon. Ares grabbed a beer from the fridge, cracking it open as he sat down in his favorite chair and turned on the TV. Everything was going to shit up top, but since he was being punished, it had nothing to do with him. He shook his head as he took a drink, changing the channels until something caught his interest. Breaking news. We bring you live to a high-speed chase happening right this minute. As you can see, the Vatican police are currently chasing after two individuals who have stolen the Pope's motor carriage. Ares spit out his drink because two faces appeared on the screen. One of whom was the person responsible for his punishment in the first place. What the fuck, was all he could say. Chapter 67. The Sword Heart sect were going about their business calmly. Despite all the chaos happening in the world right now, they weren't greatly affected. And even the fact that they were technically at war with both the race of Amazons and the company of Amazon didn't affect them that much. Amazon, both sides, didn't even know where they lived. So of course, they were safe from most forms of reprisal due to this. They had attacked a few warehouses in the time that Ocean Song was gone, and they had procured many of the illicit gains that now stocked the vaults of the sect. The sect was officially not poor anymore, if barely. Mel was patting Tyson's head, telling him how happy she was to receive his latest gift. In his free time, he had been practicing his forging by making all manner of kitchenware for her. His practice with the god Hephaestus had allowed him a breakthrough in his crafting, and he had gotten better at making smaller, more intricate pieces. Dozens of pots and pans hung all around them. Equally, there were kitchen knives of all varieties that now filled drawers and walls for Mel to use. Most Cyclops were born smiths. But as Hephaestus was teaching him that for a newborn Cyclops, it takes a very long time for them to develop the delicate skills needed to handle heightier work. That any random smith can hammer a sword into shape, but a true master can use their hammer to forge even the most delicate pieces of jewelry if they wanted. So Tyson had been focusing most of his efforts on making smaller things. That's not to say he had been ignoring his normal crafting either. His personal forge was filled with weapons hanging on the walls. Sometimes he smelt them back down, but if they made him happy, he would hang them up for anyone to use if they needed. Tyson remembered what Ocean Song told him, that his job would be to supply everyone in the sect with a divine weapon. He didn't take that as hyperbole, and while none of his weapons would be what he could call divine weapons, Tyson felt that at least, he should have a lot of weapons made for anyone who joined up. Ocean Song wasn't shy about saying how they would be recruiting new generations of disciples in the future, and Tyson wanted to be prepared. Ocean also told Tyson that he should make thousands of weapons for the future so he can shoot them at people while calling them mongrels. He didn't know what that meant, but he would listen to his older brother. Mel had settled in as well. Her days had become something of a routine, one she looked forward to. She never anticipated that as a goddess, she would be serving as a cook for a bunch of mortals and monsters, but here she was, preparing for dinner tonight. And being a cook for them was a full-time job. Tyson alone could eat a cow easily. She was very happy to have a large set of kitchenware to work with now as well. And she absolutely adored Tyson and would happily accept any of his gifts. She had been surprised that no one from her side of the fence had come over and told her to go back home. Sure, she had seen a certain raven around every now and then, but it didn't make any moves or say anything to her to indicate that she should go home. And it wasn't like Helheim couldn't operate without her. Frankly, most of it was automated at this point, and she had Garmer, her faithful wolf, to watch over if anyone or anything decided to cause trouble. And it wasn't like she was cut off from her realm either. She was more than able to tell if something happened that required her immediate return. All in all, it was a much-needed and ironically helpful vacation considering she was working like a menial laborer. Overall, she was happy right now. It took her mind off her romance troubles, and it awakened a sort of maternal side of her that she didn't have before. On the other side of the sect, Medusa burst out of her workshop. Smoke and smog billowed outwards as she coughed and gasped in the fresh air. She nearly fell over in relief as a visible purple smoke wafted out of the room she just exited. Most noticeably, however, was the obscenely large sword on her back that she carried around like it wasn't even there. There was one person near her that noticed what was happening. Daedalus was knee-deep in a freshly plowed garden as he stood up and scowled angrily in her direction. "What's that smell? I can smell the toxicity from here. It's going to kill off all the plants I just put into the dirt." "I was making poison," Medusa wheezed back. "I noticed." Daedalus gestured to the purple smoke. "Why are you making poison? Ask that dumbass yourself. He told me to start doing it." She threw her arms up. Daedalus let out a sigh, acknowledging that response. "Are you at least making progress?" Medusa scowled deeply. "I'm good at it, and I've been making a lot of progress." She shouted angrily. "I'm sorry to hear that." He shouted back, matching her tone. He understood. She was angry that she was apparently good at the stupid thing that Ocean Song made her do. Just as Daedalus was angry that he turned out to be skilled at the things Ocean Song made up on a whim. "Wait, is that where my herbs went?" Daedalus's eyes widened. Medusa looked at him and pursed her lips. "Where else do you expect me to get herbs to make poison from? You stole my herbs. Do you have any idea how long it took me to till this patch of dirt and plant them? We stole them together, they're not just yours." Medusa crossed her arms, defending herself. Amazon supplies not just mundane things. When they almost got smashed by the giant bronze automaton, it turned out they had picked rather well and stolen a truck full of magical stuff. Some celestial bronze wasn't uncommon, but they also found certain herbs, even a few species of mythical animals. Daedalus still glared at her. These were my share. You got your own share. I already used mine, Medusa said casually. That's it. Daedalus drew his sword. You want to fight? Medusa grabbed the massive and heavy sword off her back, but surprisingly, Daedalus wasn't deterred. Just as they were about to clash, Nessie appeared in front of them, letting out a loud, "Bahu!" Mother! Daedalus nearly jumped from his spot at the sudden arrival. Stop doing that. HMPH. Medusa put her sword away. Bahu! Nessie pointed her flipper at both of them in accusation. While neither could understand it, they could pick up what she was trying to say. Daedalus scoffed. I was just going to teach her a lesson. I was only going to beat him up a bit. Medusa also defended herself from the accusation. Funnily, they weren't lying. It was far from the first time they had started fighting. Before they could continue arguing, they heard a honking. A car horn, to be specific. And it was odd because, for one, they were high up in the air on a literal mountain, and the nearest road was miles away. And two, there wasn't even a road up to their mountain. And three, not many people actually knew where they lived. Thus, they came to one conclusion on who it was. Everyone seemed to stop what they were doing and head towards the entrance to the sect. And that's when they all went quiet under the continuous horn honking. They watched, expressionlessly, as a white truck with a glass container on the back, with Ocean Song sitting inside, drove up the thousands of steps that led to the entrance to the sect. The car appeared to be having quite a bit of trouble, yet it kept moving with surprising willpower. The fact that it was even capable of scaling the steps was because it was a smaller than average automobile. But that isn't what made them all quiet, well, most of them. Tyson was oblivious and just happy to see his brother again after a long time. The others had mixed looks of confusion and growing horror. Because they recognized the Popemobile. And particularly, they recognized the hat on Ocean Song's head. The car eventually reached the top, settling comfortably right at the entrance. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Your sect master returns, with gains. He declared loudly and triumphantly, gesturing to both his hat and the car after he got out. Of course, his robes billowed heroically. What did you do? Medusa was the first, grabbing his collar and smacking her forehead against his. Fellow Taoist, no, what did you do? Daedalus also grabbed his collar and shook him. Did you steal the Tartarus damned Popemobile? Ocean Song silently looked away. We're dead. Medusa released him. Not the normal dead either. Daedalus let out a sigh. There's no coming back from this. I wonder if I can hide in Tartarus. Do you think if we admit to a certain someone about her tree, it would be the lesser of two evils here? Medusa asked. Fellow Taoists, you're overlooking something important. They both looked to Ocean Song again. My hat as well, he said proudly, hands clasped behind his back. I have ventured to the heavens and emerged victorious. The driver's side door slammed shut, breaking them from their growing distress as they overlooked one important fact, that someone was driving him. They all turned to look at the woman, who had an uncannily vacant expression on her face. All except Mel. Mel looked at her, and her eyes widened in horror. Mel could see beyond the false facsimile at the front. Beyond it, she could see the wings, the eyes, the shape, and the power of it. She, of course, knew what it was. She, as a goddess, would have to be utterly ignorant of the world not to know who they were. Every religion, every pantheon, they all knew who they were. Oh, and this is Ambriel. I didn't think she would follow me back home, but here she is. Therefore, she is now a fellow sect member. Ocean Song declared, not caring to even run it past her. Oh, and she's an angel. There was a brief moment where they processed that last part. What? Line break. Hercules sat happily in his seat. He had a hot dog in one hand, half eaten, and a warm beer in the other. It had been one of his long desires. Being the god of sports, he could watch sports taking place, even from his island. But he had long desired to attend the games himself. To embrace the atmosphere, the enthusiasm of the crowd, and the thrill of watching everything with his eyes and to be here and be part of the excitement. And now, he finally was able to do so. He couldn't claim to be a big fan of the Boston Red Sox, but Fenway Park was legendary in the world of baseball, so he wanted to check it off his box. A tour of every major stadium or field for all his favorite sports. Now, he had all the time in the world to do so. He hadn't felt this happy and relaxed in centuries. There weren't a great many people here today, it was one of their early season games against a team that most fans didn't really care about. Not one of the legendary rivalries, nor a World Series game. Maybe a third of the stadium was filled, but Hercules didn't mind. He sat high up in the bleachers, all by himself for the most part, enjoying it all the same. To him, there wasn't much difference between being in a fieldside seat or high up in the nosebleeds. He wasn't a god of sports anymore, but all the same, he took pride in his previous domain at least. It wasn't just the hot dog and beer either. He reached into his pocket and took out a golden apple, biting into it. It felt appropriate, probably because he could feel those approaching. Heracles. Someone touched down not far away from him, the mist swirled to keep it all hidden. The former god frowned because the newcomer was blocking his view. "What do you want, Artemis?" he grunted. "And move out of the way, you're blocking the game." The goddess of the hunt scowled deeply, not used to being talked to so rudely. She wanted to say something about finally tracking him down, but that seemed rather inappropriate, considering he was casually sitting here watching a game of baseball. "You're to come with me immediately," she demanded. Let me think." He tapped his chin. "I'm going to have to go with no." It wasn't a request. Hercules tilted his head and then slowly started to smile. "Are you going to fight me, Artemis?" Artemis narrowed her eyes, her bow appearing in her hands. "I've been given full authority to hunt." Hercules wasn't intimidated. In fact, he chuckled. "You really don't get it, do you?" He stood up, stretching his back, and at his side, he lifted up his new club, which was carved from one of the branches of Hera's golden apple tree. "I'm not a god anymore." "That's precisely the problem," she said in a low tone. "Zeus is furious. And now, so is Hera. You crossed the line, Heracles." No, I still smiled good-naturedly. "I mean, you seem to forget. I'm mortal now. That means certain rules are back in place. Let me ask you again, Artemis, are you going to fight me like that?" That is to say, a god wasn't allowed to fight a mortal with their full strength. There were strict rules when it came to a god utilizing their full power on a mortal or without cause. And Hercules, he fought gods before he ever became one. Artemis paused and considered what he truly said. There was a beat of hesitation as she realized that he was correct. They had been focused on him as a fellow god, but now, perhaps it really sunk in that he threw away his godhood. "You stole Hera's golden apples, you broke part of her tree." Artemis spoke up, pointing out that they had cause in this case. "Sure," Hercules acknowledged. "Go ahead, curse me if you're too afraid to fight." He held his arms open, looking up at the sky. "Take your best shot." Surprisingly, the sky didn't answer. Artemis, though, wasn't shocked by the lack of response. Just like the others, they were confused in equal measure to angered by his actions. "You're playing a dangerous game." Hercules sat back down. "Funny you say that, because I felt like I stopped playing games. The stupid game you all play, I don't want to be involved anymore. That's it, leave me alone, and I'll leave you all alone. A good deal, right?" "That's not how it works, and you know it." Hercules let out a sigh. "Of course I know, I spent thousands of years with you lot." His tone carried a sharp edge. "So, let me make it a bit clearer for you all. I'm done. I'm not playing anymore, and I know that won't convince you. I could threaten, I could say that every time you all try your stupid games again, I'll just go over to your houses and wreck them in retaliation." Artemis was about to open her mouth, but Hercules held up a hand to shush her. "Look, Artemis, I know what you're going to say, but I want you to understand something. I have nothing left to lose. Consider that for a moment. I have no friends left, no family. I willingly gave up being a god, my supposed reward." Hercules took a breath and continued in a lower tone. "Consider this, and ask yourself. If I get pissed off, what's stopping me from flipping everything over?" Artemis did consider it. She heard every one of his words, and they sank deep into her mind as he said each one. For the first time, she realized she wasn't in a position of power. Threats, bribes, he made it abundantly clear that none of that would work. They had no one to threaten him with. They had nothing to bribe him with. He gave up godhood, the single greatest boon they could realistically give. And the realization of horror finally dawned on the goddess of the hunt. That they well and truly pushed Hercules to the edge, and they had nothing to keep him in line with any longer. That, a pawn they had on the board for so long had walked off it, and they had nothing to force it back on. Her silence was telling enough for Hercules. And Artemis. Hercules picked the golden apple up again, taking another bite. Tell that lieutenant of yours that I saved her family, so we're even. Chapter 68. Now that Ocean Song had returned to the sect, he had time to inspect the progress being made, both to the sect as a whole and to his sect members. A good sect leader meant lifting up sect members with him. Foolish were the sects who only relied upon a singular powerful sect leader to ward off enemies. As a proper cultivator, he must learn from his peers' mistakes and take the better path. Daedalus, Medusa, and Tyson were all sitting down cross-legged in front of him in the courtyard. Ocean Song watched them intently, focusing on their cultivation. Good, good, Ocean Song declared, all of you are nearing foundation establishment. So, I will give the next lecture for you all to prepare. He said proudly. The three of them opened their eyes, though only Tyson showed a hint of enthusiasm. Truthfully, Medusa and Daedalus at this point were very much just accepting anything that happened now. It didn't help that Ocean Song was still wearing the Pope's hat, which made it hard for them to focus on anything else due to how ridiculous it looked. And the apparent angel was standing off to the side, unmoving, unblinking. Chi condensing realm is about sensing and taking the world's chi into yourself, refining it in your meridians for personal use. It's about opening the hidden passageways within your body and clearing out impurities. You should have realized by now that once all your meridians open, they form a cycle for which you can constantly harness the power of heaven and earth. Ocean Song paced back and forth, letting his profound words sink in. Medusa was at the 11th level of chi condensation, almost to the peak. Once she reached the 12th level, she could solidify her cultivation base and then attempt to break through. Daedalus was a little behind at the 10th level, which was still impressive considering his body wasn't his original body. It spoke of his skill that his current body was perfect enough that it was nearly indistinguishable from his real one. But even so, Ocean Song knew that it had drawbacks and hindered his cultivation. But once he reached higher levels, he could properly reform his body and return to the origin. Tyson, though, was surprisingly at the top. He had already reached the 12th level of chi condensation. The pure simplicity that he had as a young boy had made it easier for him to digest the teachings. Why must one open all their meridians to attack the foundation establishment stage? Ocean Song posted the question. He gave them a moment, but they didn't seem to answer. Because the secret of foundation establishment is turning your chi into liquid form within your dantian. He had come a long way since he nearly killed himself, multiple times, while blazing the path of cultivation for himself on that island. Now, look at him, leading his juniors to break through themselves. Chi is transformed under pressure. One must cycle their cultivation, forming a vortex within the body, to condense it within their meridians, then merge it together to form their dantian and inner chi si. This is why one must open all 12 meridians to form a complete sequence. He stood in front of them, hands clasped behind his back, robes billowing. One must become the bridge between heaven and earth. Your body is the furnace, your meridians the flames. The larger your sea of chi, the more your dantian will expand, which will influence your core formation. He continued to oversee their cultivation. None of them were attempting foundation establishment yet, but he was making sure they were on the correct path. Even Tyson, who could technically attempt it, was just cultivating normally. Ocean Song put a hand on his back to look to see how his chi cycled through his body and nodded to himself, seeing his junior brother having no problems. They were all progressing nicely. He too had his own cultivation he needed to take care of as well. His nascent soul had grown, but he needed time to sit down and contemplate his experiences, to digest everything and meditate on everything he went through. To grow the nascent soul, one must experience life to give experiences to the newborn immortal soul within oneself. It was why, in many of the sacred texts, cultivators often acted like mortals and descended to the mortal world. The easiest way to experience life was to spend a lifetime as a mortal, living through life, death, love, hate, and everything in between. However, Ocean Song's situation was a little different, thus, he had been acting accordingly. Frankly, his current life experience was minuscule compared to the ancient beings in the sacred texts that usually observed the nascent soul realm. Therefore, he didn't need to pretend, nor did he need to arrange things for him to experience life. Simply living as he did now and doing everything according to his heart was the best path forward. Alright, fellow Taoists, Ocean Song clapped his hands. I believe it's enough for now. You all look good, keep it up. When you feel you're ready to progress forward, I will be here to assist. It would make things significantly easier compared to when he went through Foundation establishment. Now, I believe it's time we finally put the finishing touches on the sect. He looked up and smiled. Line break. Ocean Song flew around on his sword. He stopped at the east. There was a statue in the form of the Azure Dragon. He gave it a look over, noticing the profound arrays carved within it. Truly, Daedalus was a masterful array master. He then went to inspect Black Tortoise to the north. Just like the Azure Dragon, it gave off a profound aura. Mostly because Ocean Song had no idea how it worked but trusted Daedalus. Ocean Song learned early on that if he didn't know something, he could just call it profound, and he didn't need to explain any more to the people around him. The white tiger to the west shows no signs of abnormalities. The craftsmanship looked just as well made and without any inherent flaws that Ocean Song could notice at a glance. And lastly, he found the vermilion bird at the south. The four-direction divine beast array. He flew back up into the sect and landed upon the spot where the silver apple tree had sprouted. It had grown quite a bit in his absence. It was over his head now, which was a good sign. The sect gathered here as well. Fellow Taoist Daedalus, how confident are you? He asked. Daedalus blinked. Confident? Not at all. I have no idea what you wanted me to do. I just winged it. Ocean Song couldn't fault him. He had been doing basically the same thing from the start, and look how he turned out. No matter. Have confidence in the me that has confidence in you, fellow Taoist. Ocean Song walked over to the Popemobile that had been parked rather awkwardly in the corner of the courtyard. He took out a tarp and covered it. He reluctantly took off his Pope hat and stored it in his storage bag. Lastly, he looked at the angel that was standing there. Ocean Song met her unblinking eyes as he raised a second tarp and slowly covered her with it. And as such, no one will notice. The other sect members just stared at the scene. The angel stayed unmoving under the tarp. I will now begin, fellow Taoists. He declared, stepping back onto his sword. Be prepared, our sect protecting formation will start. He took to the skies, just above the sect. The Azure Dragon to the east. The White Tiger to the west. The Black Tortoise to the north. And the Vermilion Bird to the south. He flared his cultivation base. Rise, he commanded, and the statues all began to glow. The formation appeared, carved onto each statue, linked together. And at the center was the silver apple tree. However, it wasn't simply done with this. It was missing a significant part of the array. The statues were still merely statues without any additions. I call upon the gods of Olympus to honor a call. Ocean Song's voice reverberated through the heavens. A promise of payment for his aid in retrieving the stolen goods, as it were. He immediately felt many eyes turn to him, as his call had been laced with his power. Great god of the underworld, great goddess of the underworld, please. Hades and Persephone were called upon, and so too did their gazes turn towards him. Their blessings went out, and Ocean Song directed them to the Black Tortoise. The Black Tortoise represented winter but also death. Hades for death, Persephone representing the winter month. The perfect starting point. Great King of Gods, I request your bestowal. Ocean Song bowed to the skies, and it returned with a rumble. A bolt of lightning dropped down, but it wasn't filled with malice. Ocean Song plucked it and redirected it to the statue of the White Tiger. Olympus is attached to Western civilization. The White Tiger is the divine beast of the West. As the King of Gods, Zeus represents the West. Great God of the Forge, I request your blessing. He called upon the next one. Hephaestus turned his gaze towards Ocean Song and just grunted. With the sound of a hammer falling, Ocean Song pointed towards the White Tiger statue, and it was enveloped in the sound of metal. The White Tiger represented the element of metal. Great God of the Sun, please bestow your blessing. He called out to the sun still in the sky. As long as you don't try playing any music again. Apollo's voice rang out, and a beam of sunlight came downwards. Ocean Song pointed to the south, and it enveloped the Vermilion Bird. Great Goddess Harvest, please bestow your blessing. The mountain vibrated, and a gentle warmth seemed to envelop it as the goddess Demeter answered the call as per the promise. From his directing, it surged towards the Vermilion Bird. The Vermilion Bird represented fire and summer. The goddess Demeter held domain over the season of summer. Persephone returns to her mother's side during the summer, and during the winter, she returns to the underworld with Hades. It was a perfect cycle established between them, two opposites that balanced each other out. And of course, the Vermilion Bird represented the element of fire. Lastly, the Azure Dragon. Father, Please bestow your blessing. He called out. He immediately felt a response. The ocean churned at his father's command, and the salty welcoming air of the ocean greeted him. Ocean Song directed it to the azure dragon. Technically, the black tortoise represented water, and the azure dragon represented wood, but dragons were the kings of the oceans. Therefore, he took creative liberties. And otherwise, things didn't fit perfectly. He would freely admit that he was a bit of a perfectionist. Lastly, the azure dragon represented the east. This one was a little bit more of a gamble because they left on bad terms. But he had hoped that he at least earned his respect when they fought. Who else could represent the east but the god who stood guard over it for thousands of years? The god who stood as the warden, separating the western world from the old world. I beseech the great god Hercules. Will you bestow upon me your blessing? He did have a backup, it's just that it wasn't as good of a fit, and the array wouldn't be as complete. Strangely, he felt like a lot of eyes on him intensified a bit, like they were wondering what he was doing all of a sudden. But no response came as Ocean Song furrowed his brow. He was about to relent and call upon his backup, but then he heard a sound carried on the wind. Sorry to disappoint, but I'm not a god anymore. He recognized the voice of the god of sports. One does not forget getting dunked on so thoroughly. Ocean Song was at a loss. What do you mean you're not a god anymore? He blurted out. Well, things happened. The voice replied. Anyways, not a god anymore. Frankly, I'm surprised I could even answer a prayer. I didn't think I could anymore. But I guess this is all uncharted water. Ocean Song was still just utterly confused. What happened while he was gone? Oh, the voice returned. I have a tiny bit of juice left, not much. Probably won't be able to answer a prayer in the future, but who knows? But that's not important. I can lend you a hand as thanks. Something I left back at home. Thanks for what, fellow Taoist? He asked, but the prayer was cut off. He was still utterly confused. Ocean Song then noticed something flying from the east. It wasn't until it got closer that his divine sense picked up the object soaring through the air. It was the club that was used to beat him up last time. Hercules, divine weapon. Ocean Song smiled because he was happy that his plans didn't need to change. Thank you, fellow Taoist. Ocean Song bowed, nowhere in particular, but just as a show of respect. I shall accept. The club bonked him in the head, and he fell off his sword and hit the ground next to the silver tree. The weapon landed next to him, but Ocean Song stumbled trying to stand back up, feeling dazed. A divine weapon is still a divine weapon. He grabbed it, before nearly falling over again, and tossed it towards the azure dragon statue. Thank you, fellow Taoist, he said before falling over once more onto his face. It served the same purpose as a blessing, seemingly knowing its owner's intent. It allowed its power to flow into the azure dragon statue, and then, the entire sect began to tremble. Rise, Ocean Song mumbled into the dirt as he raised his hand up. First, it was a dragon's roar, then a tiger's roar, followed by a turtle's bellow, then a bird's cry. The four divine beasts sprang to life as the sect's protective array activated. It covered the entirety of the sect. The members of the sect looked on in utter astonishment. It all converged at the center, the silver apple tree that marked the heart of the formation. The passing of seasons, the cycle of the elements. The tree even began to grow at a visible rate, reaching another 20 feet up into the air. The others stood silent, watching it unfold, but their attention was drawn elsewhere. A fiery bird took flight, flapping its flaming wings as it lazily glided around the sect. A white tiger stood upon one of the mountain peaks majestically, its aura of slaughter dissuading anyone from daring to approach. Opposite was an azure dragon that coiled around its twin to the other side. A noble aura of destruction resided within its eyes. Lastly, there was an unmoving tortoise that slept patiently at the foot of the sect, exuding an aura of death and decay. Then slowly, as the lights of the array faded, so too did the images of the divine beasts recede, and the world returned to normal. Just as suddenly as it all appeared, so too did all the prying eyes seemingly disappear. Hell was the only one who understood what was happening at this moment, other than the angel, of course. But the angel made no effort to engage or utter anything or show any inclination of support. Hell understood that this barrier that invisibly enveloped the mountain was able to even reject the many eyes of the gods from peering inside. The mountain was now and truly a safe haven, for even the gods couldn't barge in without forcing their way inside. While this was happening, Hell turned to look at the idiot on the ground who was responsible for it. She had a lot of thoughts in her mind that made her very hesitant to speak about anything. A lot of what he said, she just took as nonsense and ignored it. She didn't really care about what happened to the Greeks or whatever trouble they got into. But now, she was genuinely starting to reevaluate the idiot. And it wasn't just him either. "I did it," Daedalus cried out. "Did you see that? My calculations, my work, my effort. All of that was mine. It worked, somehow, but it worked." Bahu. Nessie held her head up to the sky and excitedly shouted to celebrate with him, and the others joined in. Even Medusa, the usually more reserved member, was showing a lot more emotion all of a sudden. Hel looked him over, the mortal. He wasn't wrong, she had seen him working on this barrier for a long time now. And she knew he was famous for his creation of the labyrinth, something that even she had to acknowledge. But, here and now, seeing another accomplishment like this, she didn't know what to say. And the fact of the matter was that Ocean Song had gathered these people together. There was the small part of her that was concerned. The skeptic, the daughter of Loki, who was used to being swept up in schemes everywhere. She wondered what his plans were. What was his end goal? What role did she play in all of this? Then she saw him put the Pope hat back on and get in the Popemobile and drive it around in circles as he joined in the celebration. Nessie climbed up on top of it awkwardly, but it didn't stop him from driving her around either. Maybe, she could have remained skeptical. That small part of her might have stayed on guard, thinking that perhaps it was all an act. But then she saw him accidentally run the angel over, and she realized that no, he's just an idiot. Chapter 69. Poseidon. Apollo furrowed his brow. "What's your kid doing?" It was a question that many of the gods wanted to ask in their hearts. So many gods suddenly giving their blessings, it caught a lot of attention. While it wasn't a proper meeting, in the normal sense, they all sort of gathered together as it was happening to watch the spectacle. Truthfully, Poseidon couldn't give an answer. He never knew what his son was doing. Only that, when he was finished, it left everyone bewildered and questioning his sanity. In this case, he didn't think much of it. He was owed blessings from his previous reward. They were blessing inanimate objects, something magical from the looks of it. No one really cared to look too deeply into it after that. Even Poseidon. He knew that his son was close to the goddess of magic, thus, it stood to reason that doing something magical probably had her help and wasn't odd. But that was before a barrier sprang to life and surrounded his sons. Poseidon blinked, remembering what he called it. A sect. A sect of what? He didn't know. Obviously the term wasn't foreign to him. There were sects of religions and such. But other than that, he didn't know why his son called it that. It was just him and his small group of friends playing around in their mountain palace. And now, he couldn't see inside. It wasn't just him. All the gods watching the spectacle, both Olympians and lesser gods who were curious, had their senses just hit a barrier and couldn't penetrate without being aggressive. Poseidon was even able to glean that unless one of them very intentionally attacked it with the purpose of breaking through, even trying to be forceful wouldn't work. Which was a feat in and of itself. How many places in the world were able to shield themselves from the gazes of the gods? The number could probably be counted on one hand. And taking into consideration that this place didn't belong to another god or a mortal creature, it made it even rarer. There was of course the labyrinth, which was elusive by nature and rejected outside interference and spying by nature of its existence. However, this was significantly different in application. But Poseidon was also aware of who was responsible for helping erect it. The same man who created the labyrinth was now working under his son. Normally, he would be annoyed at a child of Athena being close to one of his children, but in this case, he only found himself proud that his son got himself a good subordinate. Daedalus was a name known to all the gods, be it notorious or not. Thus, the explanation could land solely at his feet. However, Poseidon found himself questioning that. In fact, in this moment, he found himself questioning a lot of things regarding his son. His son has been running wild for months now, and he's gotten into a lot of trouble. Yet, every time, he seems to somehow get out of it, and the trouble never finds itself landing on him when it's all resolved. In the incident with the Lotus Eaters, his son was at the center. The incident with the stolen divine items, and Hera's apple tree, he was at the center. Hercules abandoned his position as a god, his son had just visited him and passed through the pillars. His toilet was missing, his son was suspiciously present when it happened. But now, his son had erected a powerful barrier, one that repelled the sight of the gods. Poseidon knew that he wasn't the only one having these thoughts. For most of the issues happening in the past months, they had been far too busy dealing with the cleanup and problems that arose. Now that things had settled. Not really, they were still a bit tense because of Hercules's issue, but it wasn't an immediately pressing matter. They had time to contemplate the singular consistent variable between all these incidents. Poseidon would recognize that he was perhaps not the most intelligent god present. As much as he detested Athena, she was the goddess of wisdom for a reason. And likewise, plenty of the gods here, despite their eccentricities, didn't lose to Poseidon when it came to his own intelligence. Suffice to say, Poseidon knew for a fact that they also connected the dots rather quickly at this point. Perhaps, they just didn't know what feelings they should have for now. Because while his son had been present and a key component to everything thus far, his role had always been downplayed. He miraculously always came out ahead. But that wouldn't last long in his fellow gods' eyes. Good will never lasted long with a god. For gods, they often didn't care about what you did for them before, they care about what you're doing for them now when they need something. And a mortal suddenly stopping them from looking upon his home was suspicious. It allowed many of the ones present to slowly start to consider other thoughts regarding him. His son just brought himself the full attention of Olympus, and this time, there was nothing to distract them with. Sure, they were eyeing Hercules, who had given a hand. But more so than directing their attention to the former god, it only made them double down on Ocean Song. Curiosity and uncertainty had quickly taken root in many of their hearts. And plenty of them could find themselves not liking what they now thought. Gods were, by nature, paranoid. So what happens when you do something, even unintentionally, to exacerbate that paranoia? Especially something like flamboyantly hiding from every god in the world. And now that most of them had paid their debts, making it so they didn't need to hold themselves back. Not everyone cared, no one said anything outwardly, but Poseidon knew that his son had the attention of many of them now, and not for good reasons. Line break. Ocean Song sat cross-legged within his room. He was cultivating. His cultivation base rotated smoothly, finding no flaws. The chi within his body was plentiful and thick, filling his meridians fully. At this point, he could confidently say that he has reached the point in the nascent soul realm that he can no longer increase the threshold there. That is to say, he could say that he's just about at the nascent soul perfection, just a breath away. But that small step was more like a chasm in this case. It wasn't a matter of just continuously gathering chi to strengthen his foundation or push through with brute force. His trip had been to grow his nascent soul, to untie a knot in his heart. He would admit that the knot in his heart hadn't fully untied. It had loosened considerably, and his heart wasn't focused on the thoughts of his mother too much. But there was still something there that prevented him from taking the next step forward. He didn't know what it was. His nascent soul could be seen as almost grown but lacking that final step as well, proving his own assumptions that he was missing something. The nascent soul stage isn't as linear as the previous stages. It followed the same threshold: early, middle, late, and then perfection. A nascent soul grows from emotions, good and bad. Memories, one could say. Ocean Song remembered someone saying in his previous life that humans were just the sum of their experiences. In that train of thought, it's not outlandish to say that someone from a year beforehand could be a completely different person compared to a year later. As the saying goes, a scholar that has been gone for 3 days must be reevaluated with new eyes. Ocean's soul pondered these sentiments. Could it simply be that he hasn't experienced enough life? How does one even measure experience? If someone was 40 years old but lived a shallow life, does that automatically mean they're more experienced than a 30-year-old who has walked across numerous worlds? He could guess that his scrutinizing and anxious intentions towards it probably didn't help matters. You can't force those kinds of things. If it was a sincere expression of life, then it would only serve to harm his foundation, and when he attempted to achieve immortality in the future, he may not even be successful. The nascent soul realm, one could say, is the realm in which a cultivator cultivates their heart. From chi condensation through core formation, one builds their cultivation base, body, and chi. Nascent soul to strengthen one's heart and soul, and Tao seeking to master their Tao. When all these come together, one can attempt to break through to immortality, unburdened by lifespan, claiming an eternal existence equal to the sun and moon. If any one of those aspects of a cultivator is found wanting, then immortality will be beyond their reach. He stopped pondering it because he noticed something outside the sect and perked up immediately. He quickly threw out his sword, stepping on it to fly to the entrance, where he saw someone he recognized. Ocean Song greets the great goddess Hecate. He did polite greetings, more so than usual with her because he realized she had to approach the sect on foot, like a lowly uninvited guest. Hecate scrutinized him for a moment before her eyes turned to the barrier. "What did you do?" "Yes, the magical barrier around your home," she specified, because she could guess that he has done a great many foolish things and that he might be confused. "What did you do?" "Oh, the Four Directions Divine Beast-er-a." Ocean Song perked up, and she let out a sigh after hearing the name. "Fellow Taoist Daedalus helped me set it up, using the blessings of the various gods and creating a cycle of the seasons utilizing the four directions. It forms an array that protects the sect." Hecate listened to him, gleaning the correct understanding from his words. She furrowed her brow as she looked it over and could see the concepts in its creation. She would admit that Daedalus was skilled in what he did. He was an old hand, and while not trained in a traditional path of magic, he had the experience and intelligence to muddle his way to mastery. She shook her head, dismissing that. "That's not why I'm here." Well, technically that was why she was here, but not specifically to inspect the barrier. Ocean Song smiled. "Please come inside, goddess. You're always welcome, and forgive my oversight. I will present this to you." It looked like a medallion, but it had a sword carved on it. "This is the sect token. It allows you passage through the barrier at your leisure. You don't need to wait outside or walk up. You can simply appear inside whenever you wish." Hecate looked at it for a brief moment. "You went through the trouble of setting up a barrier this powerful, stronger than even the one over Camp Halfblood, and you're simply handing me something that ignores it." "Yes." Hecate snatched it from his hand before running a hand down her face in exasperation. "You realize that this is a slap to the face of the gods, right?" Ocean Song blinked. No, she had the urge to kick him. So, the normal interactions with him. But her fondness for him was winning out at the moment. Imagine, you are a god, all-powerful, lording over all mortals. Then, one of those mortals, someone infinitely far beneath you, suddenly sets up a barrier around their home, explicitly blocking you from looking inside. How would that make you feel? Ocean Song opened his mouth, and his eyes widened. Oh. Yes, oh, she did kick him, lightly, in the shin. With a huff of indignance, she dragged him inside. Conveniently, to her annoyance, there was a place they could talk in private. She stored away the token. Part of her was flattered and treated it seriously, despite his stupidity with it. She promised to give him a stern lecture on not handing these out casually. Even if she would refuse to hand hers back, it was hers now. Still, there was an undercurrent right now due to what he did. It was being somewhat overshadowed by other things, such as Hercules' return to the world and his rejection of godhood so blatantly. But that wouldn't keep attention away from him for long. Hercules would come and go as he pleased. But Ocean Song and his sect wouldn't be going anywhere and could become an easy target if someone expressed dissatisfaction with his actions. She crossed her arms, clicking her tongue as she saw his stupid expression. Showing no hint of fear or trepidation, just looking at her with affection. She wouldn't say it out loud, but Hecate had been avoiding him since he returned. Even with all the commotion he caused, she had to reluctantly force herself to come over. The goddess of magic was hesitant about a lot of things. Even as an ancient entity like her, she wasn't immune to things like embarrassment or apprehension. The last time she was here, suffice to say she had a lot on her mind regarding the stupid Cyclops in front of her. But he had apparently forced her hand. She quickly grabbed his cheek, pulling on it. "Now, you will listen to me, and I don't want to hear any of your nonsense. You're going to keep your head down and not cause any problems for a while, do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am, HMPH. She released him, crossing her arms once more. "I can't watch over you all the time, I'm busy. Especially when a certain idiot made it so I had a cabin built as well. I'm sure your children must be happy." Ocean Song replied, unintentionally hitting her right in her weak spot. Hecate harumphed coldly, but her lips twitched upwards. "Yes, my children are very happy. I've also been able to use it as an excuse to interact with them more. Building a temple is no small matter, so of course I have to meticulously oversee every aspect." Hecate was one that cared a great deal about her children. "And Chiron spoke with me, he suggested that I could teach classes periodically. They would have to be available to everyone to make it fair, but I would not be against either." It was another excuse for her to spend more time with her children, helping them without causing problems. You said that other gods may get angry. There haven't been any problems, have there? Ocean Song asked. She scowled deeply. Some annoying idiots who think they deserve more than they're worth. Her tone was dismissive, and she ultimately waved it off. Nothing I can't handle. That's good. He just smiled brightly. Her lips twitch again, seeing her expression, and she flipped her hand over. I have some. Lyra asked me to bring it to you. Ocean Song took it. It was a piece of paper with various drawings on it. Specifically, it was of him and Lyra and some bits of their adventure together. And also, it showed Hecate on it too. The goddess of magic crossed her arms again, looking away. She had some nonsense thoughts, asking me if Mr. Ocean was going to be her new dad. Ocean Song looked at her and the colored drawings that Lyra made. He felt something strange. A warmness flowed through him, and it felt like suddenly everything clicked. The wind immediately whipped around him, and his chi erupted almost uncontrollably. Though, despite the suddenness and the confusion and surprise from Hecate, he only had a gentle smile on his face. His nascent soul had become complete, perfected. He understood at that point. It wasn't about experiencing life. It was about finding what you cherished in life and allowing it to firm your heart, never allowing it to bend or break. He regrets not being able to meet his mother. He regrets that she died before he had the chance to answer the questions that plagued him. However, regrets were part of life. What one needed was a firm heart to accept the regrets and not let them weigh you down. Now, his heart was full and unbreakable. Apologies for the rude interruption, goddess. However, it appears as though I am going to be making a breakthrough into the next realm. Chapter 70. Hecate didn't know what he was talking about as Ocean Song shot up into the sky. However, he sounded more serious than he normally did, which made Hecate not interrupt him. Instead, she simply stood still and watched what he was going to do. She didn't know why he was high up in the air, that is, until she started to feel the changes in the world. It was subtle at first. The wind slowly started to pick up. The sky slowly began to tremble. And then something even stranger pricked her senses. As the goddess of magic, she was very familiar with the ebb and flow of magic in the world. From a natural standpoint, Ocean Song almost always was sucking up the magic around him. It wasn't strange, plenty of beings did the same thing. So, it took her a moment to notice that it began to increase. Gradually at first, then, she could feel it truly. He turned into a vortex, and the magics in the area began to get swept up. The mountain range, the state, the east coast, gradually, it began to encapsulate the entire country. The magic power in the entire country was pulled towards him, and the changes in the world could be felt by even those without a hint of magical talent. The sky changed, and thunder began to boom as the normal weather became disrupted and chaotic. The tides on the coast began to build and break, a massive storm rolling in on the horizon, pulled by the unseen waves of magic. Monsters were more keen than most. They could sense something wrong, almost unconsciously looking in the direction of Ocean Song. Poseidon, who had already left Olympus and was peacefully resting in Atlantis, had opened his eyes, looking towards the home of his son. He could feel the turbulence sweeping across his ocean realm. Zeus, silently sitting upon his throne, had suddenly jolted and turned his head towards the south as his domain of the sky had turned to utter chaos. Chiron paused mid-listen as many of his students became distracted. He couldn't blame them. He too looked upward at what had been a clear blue sky moments ago, which was now rolling with clouds pulled in from distant horizons, turning black, thundering. Strangely, he didn't feel the normal fury of Zeus within them. It was daytime, and Apollo, who usually passed the time riding the sun across the sky while practicing or playing music, had unconsciously let out a hiss from his harp, missing the right note. He looked down as the clouds began to swirl around one location, like a hurricane that had spontaneously appeared in the eastern hemisphere. He frowned as his chariot vibrated and shook, placing a steady hand on the reins. Hercules wasn't ignorant either. Stripped of his godhood, by his own hand, he still had connections to the world. He was ancient, he was powerful, he picked up the changes happening quickly. But he also could taste the familiar flavor on the air and just grinned before chuckling. He was peeved that the baseball game he was watching had suddenly gotten paused due to the weather, but he would forgive it this time. Unbeknownst to the gods, though, in the northwest, below a mountain that suppressed it, an entity stirred and opened its eyes in a daze, looking towards the southeast before going back to slumber. There were similar scenes all across the country, and it wasn't limited to just the Greek gods. The West, North America and specifically the United States, had become a hotbed for all manner of mythological entities. Odin sat on a bench, his one eye peering into the distance. The birds he had been feeding had long fled due to instincts. A god of wisdom, a god of magic, he could take measure of the phenomena in their full scope. Gradually his lips turned upwards. Ironically, the one feeling the most profound confusion wasn't the gods, it was a monster. Echidna felt a prickling sensation across her skin. She was the mother of monsters, conceptually, physically. Even the mothers that didn't descend from her, she had a connection to, a sort of authority. While others felt the changes happening in the world, she felt the changes happening to one of her kin. That is, she felt a monster breaking from its shackles. She felt a monster doing something she didn't think was possible. A monster was ascending to godhood all on their own. For Hecate, who was standing right there, things looked much different. Before, she sort of correlated his existence with that of a lesser god. It was different, but also not entirely wrong. However, she also couldn't confidently claim he was a god before either. He was in some strange state of existence where he was both his own idol of worship and still was mortal in a way. She was not oblivious to the fact that he was doing strange things to himself, so she chalked it up to his continued strangeness and would just watch him closely. Now, though, it felt different. It was genuinely like she was now watching a lesser god come into existence. One thought arose above all others in that moment. There had been monsters who had become gods before. Yet, for every example she could pick in her head, it was the result of another god pulling them upwards. She couldn't find an example of a single time where a monster ascended to godhood all on their own. There was an immediate sense of worry. A strange sense, if anything. It was rare for her to worry about others not of her blood. Her emotions, her love and protectiveness, almost exclusively fell upon her children and no one else. Yet now, she found herself doing something perhaps a bit inappropriate and foolish. There was so much magical power that had been pulled to this area, it didn't take much effort from her to do, but her unique touch would be seen by everyone. Even so, she used the absurd amount of magic in the area to weave a large coverage of mists around the mountain range, covering everything completely. Hecate understood that he had shot into the sky to avoid damaging his home, leaving the safety of his barrier. So, she hid him from everyone. Line break. Ocean Song sat cross-legged, floating in the sky. He was oblivious to what was happening around him at the moment. Focusing on his cultivation, he rotated his cultivation base beyond anything he had done before. He thought he had reached the limit of what his body could handle when it came to chi. But as soon as he began to attack the threshold of the Tao-seeking realm, it was like trying to put out a fire with a cup of water at a time. Each realm needs certain requirements to progress. Chi condensation, of course, is the basis for everything, to teach you how to sense and cultivate chi from the world. But that didn't mean that chi suddenly became irrelevant from that point forward. Chi was the beginning and the primary factor of everything. They were called chi cultivators for a reason. Even now, when he was breaking through to the Tao-seeking realm, the realm primarily for understanding and refining one's Tao, chi was still a prevalent necessity. Chi was how one connected to heaven and earth. It was the bridge that allowed one to ascend the heavens. So, he did the obvious. He began to pull on all the chi around him, as much as possible, without any thoughts of stopping. His cultivation base was firm and unyielding, yet even so, it strained with the influx of chi that he began to absorb from the world. Ocean Song knew for sure that after he broke through, this area would become a holy realm blessed by an abundance of chi. That his fellow sect members would see their cultivation progress by leaps and bounds by the density of chi in the area. But he didn't have time to dwell on those thoughts. Chi condensation was the beginning. He established his foundation. Then he created his golden core, taking another path to also create his demonic core. This allowed him to truly begin to understand his Tao. Yin and Yang, Tai Chi. One of godly origin, the other of monster origin. They complemented each other and repulsed one another. They mirrored the primordial laws of the world. In the golden core realm, he touched upon the Tao, allowing himself a dead start. In the nascent soul realm, he furthered his Tao. He tempered it with understanding and worldly wisdom. His nascent soul, the infant that represented his immortal soul, had fully grown to match him. It didn't mean it was perfect, it didn't mean that it was without flaws. Ocean Song realized that there was no such thing as a perfect nascent soul. It's grown by one's experiences, good and bad, and experiences are what make a person. You can't have good without the bad, and you can't live life without its ups and downs. It wasn't a detriment to have regrets, it wasn't a flaw to have sadness or despair in one's life. As long as one was willing to acknowledge their faults, it meant they could keep taking steps forward. It was only when these feelings and negative emotions pulled you down that they became heart demons. Ocean Song would admit he hasn't lived a perfect life. He hasn't even lived a long life. There were many things he has yet to experience or understand. However, his heart remained unmoving. The many negative thoughts of his had flashed across his mind. His monstrous impulses, his regret, his insecurities, his fears, he could feel them all around him, almost palpable. The turbid and rampant chi gave birth to these heart demons that seemed to latch onto his negative emotions that had been brought to the surface. It had given them form, wanting to claw at him, to dig into his heart and take root. Yet, his heart continued to beat soundly, unmoving. What was a Tao heart? It was a heart that sought the Tao. It was the unwavering convictions in oneself. It didn't mean to abandon everything in pursuit of one's goals, but it meant that no matter what happened in your life, you would remain true to yourself. His eyes snapped open, staring at the mockeries of his own self-deprecation. You are dismissed. The simple words were like casting a light upon a shadow. They were burned away from existence. There was the Tao that one sought when climbing towards the heavens and the Tao that one held in their heart. The Tao he sought was that of yin and yang, and the Tao he held in his heart. He put a name to it. Free and unfettered. It was like invisible chains around him shattered in that instant. Chains so hidden, so deeply burrowed into him, that he didn't even know they existed. Chains that he couldn't even perceive before taking this next step forward. Intertwined with the very laws of the world, meant to bind every single creature that existed under this starry sky. Ocean Song clasped his hands behind his back. His understanding of the Tao-seeking realm was still immature from before. He now realized that it wasn't merely about seeking one's Tao and claiming it from the heavens. It was about keeping your Tao firmly in your heart. If you didn't have a strong Tao heart, what right did you have to compete with the heavens and become immortal? What right did you have to look down upon all living beings and stand unmoving, unaging, as the ages passed? The barrier between nascent soul and Tao-seeking was a test of worthiness. His nascent soul stirred, the infant that had grown had left his body. It manifested in front of him. Like an illusion, a ghostly image. It absorbed its own chi, and it took form, matching Ocean Song perfectly. It wasn't a personal thought. With his eyes, Ocean Song could see just under the surface. Every crack upon it. Did that mean it was flawed, that it was weak? No, Ocean Song saw it, and he smiled. His nascent soul smiled back. Then, it bowed to him. There's no need to bow, fellow Taoist. After all, you're me. He held out his hand, and his nascent soul took it. His nascent soul was sucked back into his body, and it underwent a qualitative change. It fused with him, becoming one with him. His existence began to elevate. Flesh and blood existed, but now he began to look ethereal. Like if one looked at him, they couldn't tell if he were a mirage or not. The biggest hurdle to advance wasn't the power needed. It was the ability to look at oneself without anything to hide behind and to accept it without reservations. In this moment, Ocean Song didn't know this. He merely acted according to his heart. The chi in the surroundings continued to get absorbed unceasingly, and the last barrier shattered under his continued assault. The limit of the nascent soul had been overcome, and he stepped into the Tao-seeking realm. His illusionary-like form reaffirmed itself. Around him, it cracked and splintered before shattering, revealing him once more. He looked the same, perhaps slightly more handsome, his person having gone through a qualitative change. But people who would look up to him, they would feel the difference. For Hecate below, her breathing hitched as she stared at him. Because she well and truly felt like she was looking at a lesser god. Despite being called lesser, it was by no means a minor achievement. And most certainly this added to the fact that he was, without a doubt, a monster. She was about to say something, but her eyes dilated slightly because her mist barrier had been torn away, and she recognized the source because it carried with it a thunderous fury. Ocean Song looked up too, seeing the swirling vortex of clouds above him part and lightning gathered. Yes, my lightning tribulation has finally arrived, he yelled happily. Hecate facepalmed as the lightning bolts started hitting him. Her exasperation only alleviated slightly by his yelping and whining as the lightning continued to hit him. One part of her was feeling he was deserving of this. The other part of her was utterly bewildered that he was taking those lightning bolts without much concern. Is that the best you have? Dastardly heavens! The sky rumbled loudly as if to respond, and the lightning began to come down even harder. Regret, Hecate sighed. She didn't know what he did, only that he somehow became a lesser god. But she was without a doubt happy that he was still his idiotic self. Chapter 71. The Tao-seeking realm wasn't merely a single step forward after the nascent soul realm. As Ocean Song sat cross-legged, consolidating his newfound realm and insights, he realized that there existed a chasm between the two. In hindsight, he could acknowledge that he was able to take this step because he had already touched upon his Tao earlier in his cultivation. There were many other factors that aligned that allowed him to step forward as well. Most importantly, his Tao heart. He had been cultivating his Tao heart since day one, and he hadn't even realized the purpose or true importance until now. Ocean Song knew he would have to write down his insights for his fellow sect members to look over. And he would have to help them start focusing on their Tao hearts this early so they stand a chance to break through. But even so, the him before and the him now were the difference between heaven and earth. Getting used to his new profound cultivation, he understood that the him at nascent soul would be an ant to him now. He felt like he could take 10 versions of himself at the cultivation realm at the same time and come out victorious without any major mishaps. Or maybe that was an exaggeration. But from the sacred texts in his memories, he knows all the heavenblest like to compare themselves that way, to say how much stronger they are. Thus, he must join their ranks and declare that he could defeat 10 of him in the previous realm. He focused on his Tao, the difference between the Tao of the heavens and his own Tao heart. Within his heart he is free and unfettered. That is his Tao. But he pursues the great Tao of equalization, yin and yang, tai chi. Your Tao heart could be compared to the road you walk, the path under your feet. While the great Tao is the destination you march towards. Both are equally important. One is your driving force, the firm resilience you have to pursue the ultimate truths. The other is the laws of the world that you grasp and claim as your own. Both are needed, one can't exist without the other. Every step of cultivation tests the path under your feet. If you falter, if you stumble, then it shows that you are unworthy to touch upon the great Tao. Whereas the great Tao gives purpose to your unrelenting pursuit. With his newfound cultivation, he could see far beyond what he could before. That is to say, he could now see the proverbial path forward to the immortal realm. Qi, essence, soul. The three main components of one's being. Qi needed no explanation. It was the power of heaven and earth, the bridge between the great Tao and humans. Essence referred to the physical. The body. Without a properly tempered body, you can't handle strong cultivation, nor can you shoulder the bearings of the great Tao. Lastly, there was, of course, the soul. Without an immortal soul, how could you withstand the weight of the Tao? But those three weren't enough to achieve immortality. That's where the Tao realm came in. When your Tao converges with the great Tao, it's then that the heavens evaluate if your Tao is worthy to be immortalized upon the world. All paths converge, and with your Tao, your cultivation, you challenge the heavens and steal away immortal providence, declaring that your Tao is true. But those thoughts were still far away. He had a feeling that he would be in the Tao-seeking realm for a long time because he still needed to clear a path forward. With his new cultivation, he felt like his view of the world expanded exponentially. His divine sense easily swept over hundreds of miles. He felt brimming with power as well. Ocean Song felt that with but a twitch of his fingers, he could command storms, hurricanes, and disasters if he so chose. With a clench of his fist, he felt like he could destroy a mountain if he threw a punch. If he fought the god of war again like last time, he fully believed, in those same circumstances, that he would not need to rely on the heavenly king's divine weapon at all. The qualitative leap was indeed substantial. He would need to continue to carefully explore and understand his new power so he doesn't make any mistakes in the future. For now, his mind weighed upon his Tao heart. He declared it in the heat of the moment without thinking. But perhaps that meant it was his most earnest thoughts and feelings. To be free and unfettered. That didn't mean to be apathetic or indifferent to the world. That doesn't mean that you don't help others, that you don't have friends, that you don't have responsibilities. No, what it means at its core is that you take responsibility for your own actions even more. It means to reject chains that others try to bind you with but willingly accept the ones that you bind yourself with. It's to make your own choices. To not bow your head unless you wish to. To not accept the world, but to make the world accept you. To understand that, you can live with regrets, but you can never stop moving forward. Yes, he continued to ponder his Tao for a long while. And it was certainly not because he was recovering after being struck by multiple lightning bolts. Line break. Ocean Song stood up from the spot he was in after not healing properly. He dusted himself off and stepped onto his sword as he floated up into the sky. He wasn't oblivious to the many different eyes on him right now. Most of them were godly, some of them were not. However, for the first time, he looked back. It wasn't a matter of simply looking towards the source, but now, at his current realm, it was as if he were looking them right back in the metaphysical eyes. And for the majority of the gods, that startled them enough that they hastily pulled their gazes back. Without caring, he flew back to the sect, and under the protection of the sect protecting 4 divine beasts of 4 directions, something barrier. He forgot the name. Behold, fellow Taoists. His voice boomed as they all gathered in the usual courtyard. Ocean Song clasped his hands behind his back, his robes billowing heroically as he slowly floated down. This one has ascended to the next realm. Now, you may refer to this one as venerable. However, I also accept saint, sage, perfected one, heavenly. I'm not calling you any of those. Daedalus interrupted him. But, me either, Medusa added. But it's tradition. No, in fact, Medusa and Daedalus turned around and walked away as Ocean Song pouted. It wasn't that they weren't interested or curious about what just happened. In fact, they had a great many questions, but they refused to acknowledge any of those titles. Hell was watching from a distance. She didn't feel like she had the social credibility to interject herself right now despite her own curiosity and confusion. As 859, 7 for the angel, she was still standing still under the tarp, unmoving. Congratulations, senior brother. Tyson cupped his hands and bowed. Thank you, junior brother. Ocean Song was happy that he at least had Tyson. Bahu. Nessie joined in, though she couldn't really cup her fins, but she waved them in excitement. And Nessie. He nodded to her. Truly, they have the greatest sect protecting divine beasts. It only took a moment for Hecate to reappear as well. She looked at him wanting to say something, but she found herself silent. If before she could maybe, kinda, sorta say he was a lesser god, albeit that wasn't exactly true. But it was the closest approximation she could make at the time. Now, without a shadow of a doubt in her mind, she could point to him and say that he had become a god. The thing is, she could no longer evaluate him, she couldn't see through him anymore. Where he fell on the spectrum she had no idea, only that his existence had elevated to a level to be on par with her fellow deities. Not an Olympian mind you, but simply a god in a general sense. For so long, she had looked at him as a mortal creature, a monster. Monsters were technically immortal, but it wasn't the same as a deity. Their immortality was based on a primordial entity bound to the pits of Tartarus. Gods, while they also usually regenerated in Tartarus as well, were not tied to it the same as monsters. If one day the pit just up and decided to stop respawning monsters, gods would be wholly unaffected. Their immortal existences were tied to cosmic concepts. Now, Hecate could plainly see that he had stepped completely out of the monster threshold. She had no idea what would happen if someone tried to kill him. If she could brush off all his previous actions as just him being the strange creature he was, then this time, she was well and truly unsure of what to say or do. She did her best to recant how he even got to this point. She remembered the first time he started doing stupid things to himself. How he began to stuff his body full of magic to mimic, in a very basic and brutish way, how deities exist. It was novel, she had never seen someone try to do that before. She could acknowledge that it was clever, in a way. To try and adjust yourself to mimic higher beings in order to gain strength. It made sense on paper, but every step along the way, it just pulled further and further away from her common sense. If anything, she was dismissive of it. Sure, he was much stronger than other mortal creatures, she could acknowledge that much. But she didn't think he would have been able to take this step truly. Not that she was dismissing him as much as his actions. Was she the fool now? Great goddess. Ocean Song looked at her happily. Hecate was silent because she was having trouble answering him in this new state. It wouldn't be strong to say that before, they weren't equals. No matter what, between a god and a mortal, they would never be on equal ground. Now though, things changed. Great goddess. Ocean Song turned serious. I have broken through to the next realm. I thank you for your assistance in defending me while I broke through. Her lips twitched, remembering how Zeus tore through her mists. That was going to be annoying to deal with later for her. She knew that eventually, the king of gods would summon her and demand answers. Politely, since she had a good relationship with Zeus. Well, as good as it could be in their circles. She never crossed him before, never did anything to make him particularly angry. That was about as good as a relationship as one could have with him. But the king of gods didn't like being ignorant of things happening on his doorstep. Ocean Song once more clasped his hands behind his back. Great goddess, I have taken a step forward. My view of the world has broadened. I now stand upon a peak that many can only gaze up upon. She didn't answer him, wondering where he was going with this. She blinked because she noticed that he seemed to blush slightly. Is this lowly Cyclops worthy enough of you now? He hesitantly asked. Hecate was silent. Unconsciously, she felt her heart beat a few more times than normal. She was about to answer but blinked when she realized that he put the Pope hat on his head when she wasn't paying attention. The goddess of magic's eye twitched slightly. With a low growl, she pulled his collar and kissed him again. This time much more aggressively, not giving him a chance to speak before shoving him to the ground and disappearing. She returned to her home in the underworld, letting out a breath as she relaxed. She just started cursing the idiot in her head. Stupid fool, she let out a sigh. Who else in the world would put up with your nonsense? To take her mind off certain things, she was going to do some work she had been putting off. However, that went right out the window when minutes later, she heard a very familiar voice. Uncle, uncle, a certain idiot started shouting as he descended into the underworld. Uncle, I need help. If you confess to a girl and she kisses you after, does that mean she likes you too? His voice was loud enough so that everyone could hear it at that point. Hecate let out a sigh, palming her face. That was her idiot. Chapter 72. Good, most of us are here. Themis, the goddess of justice, looked at the others. She was sitting at a large table along with many of her fellow deities. Not all of them, but a good number of them. It was enough that they would be a force to be reckoned with. Which was the intention to begin with, then they decided to start gathering together. That is to say, they found safety in numbers. Contrary to what many demigods and mortal creatures think, suddenly becoming a god doesn't make you the top of the pyramid. Even for them, they may as well be mortals when it comes to the whims of the Olympians. Many of them had suffered at the hands of the Olympians, in their games, in their lusts, and in their greed. Granted, many of the gods here were just as bad when treating mortals, but they cared about their own circumstances in this case. It was thousands of years ago that several of them had the idea to band together. It's not as if the Olympians were unaware of their little group when it started forming. But arrogance, contempt, and egos didn't allow them to see it as anything more than a gathering of lessers. Why would they care? Until enough joined. They were by no means some stringent organization or a second faction among the Greek pantheons. Truthfully, they were a cobbled-together group of dissenting viewpoints and often argued over the smallest things. In fact, many of them belonged to different factions. The factions, of course, being those under each individual Olympian god. But at the same time, none of them were particularly stupid. They all understood the importance of what their numbers meant. It took a while, but once their numbers reached a certain point, it meant that at the very least, Olympus had to be courteous. The days of an Olympian god appearing before one of the lesser gods and demanding they bend to their whim, to warm their bed, or to suffer their wrath unprovoked had long passed. That also isn't to say those things don't happen, but now it requires more than just the half-assed thought of one of the major gods. It was a safety net, so to speak. It never made it to the history books, nor did it appear in myths and legends. But there was a time when the lesser gods of the Greek cosmology nearly rebelled. A delicate balance had been reached, and the status quo continued. Only this time, the lesser gods gained a certain standard and dignity that couldn't be trampled upon without reason. It was why Themis oversaw this gathering. As the goddess of justice, order, and fairness, she was bound to her own divine nature to preside without corruption or personal gain. Even among the lesser gods that frequented their circles, not all of them were invited this time. They left out the ones they knew liked to run to their Olympian handlers and report every detail of what's said among them. This time, they were keeping to secrecy. The scales of justice hung over the table. An oath was sworn, and if broken, justice and vengeance would petition the river Styx to bestow judgment. For the first time in a very long time, they all took the threat of an oath on the Styx seriously. Is this about what happened to Boreas? One of them brought it up. There were immediately murmurs among the gods gathered here. They were all aware the god of the north wind was currently incapacitated. He was lying in a mortal hospital as if he were mortal himself. They knew not what happened, only that someone ambushed him, beat him up, and turned him mortal to top things off. It was an incident that, while it didn't overly concern the Olympians, caused quite a bit of caution among the lesser gods. Boreas wasn't by any means the strongest of their kind, but he was still a lesser god like them. If something like that could happen to him, then why couldn't it happen to them? Despite their investigations, they still couldn't figure out what happened. Someone was shielding the secrets of the events. Even attempts at using mystical means were met with a shield from none other than the river Styx herself. They weren't fools. They could make a guess that Boreas may have broken an oath on the Styx and received his punishment. But that didn't make things less concerning for them. Breaking the oath was one matter, someone capable of running around and doing that to them was another, because they knew for a fact that it wasn't Styx herself that walked out of the underworld and broke Boreas's legs. The rumors that Styx had a champion had been whispered ever since it was declared in the halls of Olympus. All they could get from Boreas was some incoherent crying about getting run over by a car, multiple times. That, and saying that he was sorry he didn't know he was in the wrong neighborhood. No, Themis declared, we have decided not to further press on the matter with Boreas lest we anger the River of Oaths. Many of them nodded, others looked annoyed or didn't agree with the decision. Are we trying to talk to Hercules again? Our last attempt didn't go well. Charis, the god of opportunity and luck, hesitantly said. By not going well, he meant that Hercules had stuffed him into a trash can after the former god got annoyed at his attempts at recruitment. Hercules was a lesser god, as well back when he guarded the island. But since he could never leave the island, they never cared to reach a hand out to them. Perhaps things might have ended differently had they extended basic courtesy to him previously. Now that he was free and walking around, they wanted to try and bring him over to their side. If they had the support of Hercules, they could significantly improve their standing in the face of the Olympian gods. The rumors and whispers about what's happened with Hercules had already far spread among their number. Despite him spitting in the faces of the gods, even them in this case, he still walked unpunished, uncontested. If that didn't speak to the danger and status he held, then nothing would. But unfortunately, they failed in that particular endeavor, and the others weren't keen on attempting a recruitment themselves after hearing what happened to the gods they sent to approach him last time. An exasperated sigh broke through the whispers. For the love of, Nemesis groaned. We're talking about the new god that appeared. That kicked off another round of arguing between them all. Nemesis, getting annoyed, reached up and grabbed the scale hovering above them and slammed it onto the table. Can you all stop acting like a bunch of fools and focus? It's rare that we have a new god appear. When was the last one? Centuries ago. We all know how rare it is for one of the thrones to elevate someone to our number. What went unsaid is that they especially don't do it much anymore because they now have to be wary of the lesser gods holding too much power. Maybe the Olympians didn't need to care about dozens of lesser gods attempting to dethrone them in a more aggressive manner. But if they decided to throw caution to the wind and cause chaos, or even worse, if they joined with the Olympians' enemies if they pushed enough, then that could be devastating. Eris, the goddess of discord, tapped her nails on the table. He's already caused quite the commotion. She held her hand up, and it flashed briefly in the form of a golden apple before turning into a screen. This is the phenomenon that occurred when he became a god. It showed a massive storm, a pulling of magic, and an alteration of the atmosphere above North America. Obviously, they were not oblivious to this happening, but it was simply a reminder and perhaps a better perspective from this angle. Eris wasn't originally a member of this little group. All she cared about was causing chaos and discord across the world. But after what happened in Troy, the Queen of Gods confiscated her symbol, her golden apple, and she had held a grudge ever since. And make no mistake, this wasn't a mortal raised to a higher station by divine hand. This is someone who kicked open the door of divinity all by themselves. She added. Became a god themselves. One of the others, Hygeia, goddess of health and cleanliness, spoke up in surprise. This isn't the old era, you can't simply become a god. Eris scoffed. Don't talk about the old era like you were there. She waved dismissively at her fellow goddess, who was a child when comparing ages. You're more than welcome to confirm it with someone else, I have no reason to lie. She's right. Comus, god of festivities and revels, spoke up. He was also the son of Dionysus and spent time helping his father in camp. Pops had been annoyed about all the meetings he's had to go up to the mountain for. Are we sure someone didn't help him? Oris scoffed again. Which one of you is brave enough to go against the laws of Olympus? We all know they forbid anyone from elevating mortals to godhood without their permission. If they found out, the consequences didn't need to be said. Suffice to say, none of them were brave enough to do it. Nothing like that happened when I became a god. Polemon, a lesser sea god, spoke up looking confused. Leucothea also scrunched her nose. Formerly the mortal queen known as Ino. When I jumped into the sea and became a goddess, it didn't cause anything like that either. Perhaps there was a little bit of jealousy in their words. As if to say, what makes this new god so special? There was nothing like that for me either. Why did his ascension cause such a commotion? Several more deities spoke up with the same tone and confusion. Camus waved his hand, silencing them, looking half-drunk as he did so. I can say for a fact that when Pop's wife became a goddess, there definitely wasn't anything like that. We're missing the point. Nikki spoke up. As the goddess of victory, she immediately zeroed in on the most important fact. Elevating a mortal to godhood is forbidden. But there are no laws against a mortal ascending to godhood by their own hand. That made everyone go quiet. Themis nodded and smiled at her. She is correct. We have someone who went through apotheosis all by themselves. My mother was gushing over the relationship between the one in question and the goddess of magic. Are we sure that she didn't give a helping hand? Anteros, son of Aphrodite and also a god of love, spoke up. Wait, is he the one who helped that bitch get her own cabin? Bia, goddess of force, might, and raw violence, slammed her fist on the table. I supported Zeus since the Titanomachia, and I still don't have my own cabin. Many of the lesser gods here weren't happy that Hecate had her own cabin when none of them did. If Hecate cared to associate with them, then she would have been heavily ostracized. Be careful about insulting magic, she hears far more than you may think. Plutus, the god of wealth, tapped the table. Bia scoffed. I don't fear her. Fear is not the same as caution. He shook his head. Not that it matters. She has no care about what happens among us. She's content to stay in the underworld under the authority of Hades, which makes her untouchable. Bia just scowled angrily. Antaron opened his mouth again. You go down to the underworld often. Do you think she helped this mortal ascend? I wouldn't say I go down often. I generally just go down to check on my sister to put mother at ease. The Lord of the Underworld humors my presence because he knows it makes mother not cause more incidents. And we have to coordinate about economic matters sometimes. I rarely interact with the goddess of magic. However, if I were to make a guess, I would suggest that we go with the assumption that she is not the one responsible. Nikki pressed her palms together. That leaves the obvious answer then. This person, this Cyclops, had managed to ascend to godhood by their own hand. We can sit here and question it all day, but even if you could not witness the chaos in person, you all felt it. There was a round of nods from everyone gathered. It was hard to dispute what they felt themselves. Then we must act quickly. The reason we gathered, I presume, is to come up with a plan to bring him over to our side. She finished. The goddess of justice started again. That is correct. If we are to ever grow beyond this, then it is an opportunity. The ones above have not realized what this could mean for us. If we had a means to elevate mortals without breaking the laws. She didn't finish it outright, letting it be open-ended. Oris, though, smiled not so kindly. 1,000 years, 2,000, 10,000. How many gods could we raise in that time frame? Many of them, once it was put so plainly, began to realize the implications. Ancient desires and dreams came bubbling to the surface. Old ambitions that had been stomped out by the reality of their positions were now not so far-fetched. What god would be happy with remaining on the bottom? Who wouldn't convert one of the higher seats? If they were able to pull the ones above down, that meant their seats would be open for them. This is treason, one lesser god spoke up. Was it treason when the crooked one pulled his father down from his throne? Was it treason when Zeus did the same? It's simply the changing of an era. Oris egged them on, saying just the right words to sway any who were having second thoughts. The little devil on their shoulder. Even the goddess of justice wasn't unmoved by the idea, showing support for it fully. Justice, in her mind, should sit on the highest seat. No one spoke up against it. If anything, they all hesitantly looked around as if waiting for a reason to voice their agreement. Fear was normal. All of them knew what would happen if word got out. But also, when would an opportunity like this ever come again? So we are in agreement, Themis stated and waved her hand. Above the table, various images flashed around. It started with Zeus throwing down a lightning bolt, followed by someone apparently shooting a dragon from their sword at it. It showed the destruction of the Lotus Casino Hotel and the one responsible, as well as the chaos that came down on Olympus. Then, it showed the destruction in the wake of the fight involving Ares and the return of the lightning bolt. It continued to an inconspicuous mountain that now could keep out even their godly eyes. Lastly, it showed the sky churning and the cataclysmic phenomena that happened just recently before he stood above the earth, radiating power and newfound authority. Various other images flashed, but they all landed on one last image. It was a simple picture of him, hands clasped behind his back, robes billowing. For when this image was created, it was hard to tell, but it showed every detail about him for them all to see. His name is Ocean Song. The goddess of justice spoke again. And we must acquire him at all costs. Line break. Elsewhere, Ares was going about his day. He had just gotten done shoveling the stables, repairing the shooting range, fixing the lava rock wall, and even cleaning up the forge. As far as menial tasks go, he was used to it now. Frankly, there was nothing wrong with hard work, to him. Sure, as a god, it was beneath him to do these tasks. But as the god of war, these were things that soldiers, warriors, and armies needed to take care of, so they kind of sort of fit into his domain. At least, that's how he rationalized it to himself to stop from throwing a tantrum at the indignity. Though, he found a strange peace to it, like a well-deserved vacation. For many soldiers, it was what they fought for. Fight the bloody battles that made them dance between life and death, claim their rewards, then retire to peaceful twilight years. Ares was the god of war, the bloody aspect, the one you hoped blessed you as you got stabbed in the chest and tried to bite your enemies' throats out. But that didn't mean he didn't respect a warrior's retirement or their desire to stop fighting. If you fought the good fight, you deserved the rewards that came with it. So Ares sat back, cracked open a can of beer, and ignored everything else that was happening in the world. What did whatever nonsense with Hercules have to do with him? Or whatever big problem was happening that had everyone else running around? He was being punished, so he decided to ignore all of them. Just as he was about to take a drink, he caught something out of the corner of his eye. At his window was someone he most certainly recognized. What the fuck? He threw his can up and fell over in his chair. Greetings, fellow Taoist. Ocean Song was standing in his room, complete with his Pope hat. I have come to visit. Line break. A.N. Lesser gods seem to realize the opportunity that Ocean Song presents before the Olympians. If this idiot somehow stumbled onto godhood, then who, to say that they can't do it for other mortals and essentially create their own army of gods to claim the thrones of Olympus for themselves? Or at least, that's the hope logic. If you want to read one chapter ahead or support me, visit my page AStoryForOne. AStoryForOne. I also have a boosty if you can't use the above under the same name. To be continued.